Man kicks out his wife. 7 years later, she returns in a limo with triplets who look just like him. Jessica Parker could hardly believe the words coming from her husband's mouth. Accusations of betrayal echoed through the dining room of their Beverly Hills mansion in New York City, as all the guests at their anniversary party watched in awkward silence. "How you think I don't know? You think I don't have proof?" Michael shouted, his face twisted in anger, pointing his finger at her. "I saw the messages on your phone. I saw the photos. You cheated on me with that so-called colleague of yours." Jessica felt the ground vanish beneath her feet. The messages Michael mentioned were about a surprise birthday party she was planning for him. The photos were of her at the jewelry store, picking out the watch she had bought as a gift, but Michael didn't give her a chance to explain. "I want you out of my house in 15 minutes, he said, his voice suddenly cold and controlled, making it all the more terrifying. "Take your things and get out of my life." The young woman looked around, searching for support in the familiar faces. Michael's parents, Barbara and Richard, averted their eyes. His sister, Jennifer, seemed embarrassed, but didn't say a word. Their mutual friends pretended they weren't even there. In an instant, 3 years of marriage crumbled before her eyes. Jessica climbed the stairs, her legs trembling. In the bedroom, she grabbed only a few essential documents, a change of clothes and her purse. Tears blurred her vision as she tried to process what was happening. There was no reasoning with Michael when he was in that state. His explosive temper had always been a problem in their marriage, but she never imagined it would come to this. When she came back down, Michael was waiting at the door, holding it open. "Michael, please, just listen to me," she pleaded, her voice breaking. "If you don't leave now, I'll call security to escort you out," he replied, emotionless, as if speaking to a stranger. Jessica walked out of the mansion without looking back, with nothing but the clothes on her back, a small bag of documents, and a shattered heart. Little did she know, along with the dignity she was trying to preserve, she carried a secret that would change her life forever. In her womb, 3 tiny lives had just begun to grow. On the tree-lined sidewalk, Jessica pulled out her phone with trembling hands. She thought about calling a cab, but realized she had no cash. Her credit card was shared with Michael, and he had probably already cancelled it. Taking a deep breath, to steady herself, she called the only person she trusted at that moment. "Sarah," she said as soon as her friend answered, "I need your help." An hour later, Jessica was sitting on the couch in Sarah's small Soho apartment, holding a cup of tea that wouldn't stop shaking. "He didn't even let me explain, Sarah. He just believed what he wanted and threw me out in front of everyone," she said, still in shock. "That idiot was always jealous and possessive. I never understood what you saw in him," her friend replied, sitting beside her. Jessica didn't answer right away. What had she seen in Michael Thompson? The brilliant finance executive, heir to one of New York City's most influential families, had won her over with his charm, intelligence, and determination. When they first met at a charity event, she was just a young business graduate working as an executive assistant. The fairy tale had lasted 3 years, until that fateful night. "What are you going to do now?" Sarah asked, snapping her out of her thoughts. "I don't know," Jessica admitted. "I need to find a job, a place to live, and start over from scratch." "You can stay here as long as you need," her friend offered, squeezing her hand. "Tomorrow, we'll figure things out." In the following weeks, Jessica sent out resumes to dozens of companies. At 28 years old and a graduate of a good university, she had excellent qualifications, but the job market was tough. Meanwhile, she slept on Sarah's couch and avoided thinking about the future. It was during a job interview for a receptionist position at a medical clinic in Queens that her life took an unexpected turn. As part of the hiring process, all candidates had to undergo basic health exams. Jessica was in the doctor's office, waiting for her test results, when Dr. Emily walked in with a puzzled expression. "Mrs. Parker, you're pregnant." Jessica felt the world spin. That's not possible. There must be some mistake." The doctor smiled gently. "There's no mistake. Your blood HCG levels are quite high. I'd say you're about 3 weeks along." 3 weeks, exactly before the night Michael had kicked her out of the house, his birthday, when they had celebrated together before the surprise party she had been planning. The irony of the situation hit her like a punch to the gut. "Would you like to have an ultrasound to confirm?" the doctor suggested. Jessica nodded, still dazed. In the ultrasound room, lying on the cold table with gel on her abdomen, Jessica stared at the screen without really understanding what she was seeing. The technician moved the transducer a few times, furrowed her brow in concentration, and then called Dr. Emily. After a few minutes of uneasy silence, with the two professionals exchanging glances, the doctor finally spoke. "Mrs. Parker, I have some news that might be a little surprising." Jessica's heart raced. "What is it? Is something wrong with the baby?" "No, nothing's wrong." The doctor smiled, pointing at the screen. "But it's not just one baby. I'm seeing 3 distinct gestational sacs. You're expecting triplets." Jessica's world stopped completely. Triplets, her alone, homeless, jobless, pregnant with triplets. "Are you sure?" she managed to stammer. "Absolutely," the doctor confirmed. "It's a multiple pregnancy, and from what I can see, they're identical triplets, likely from the splitting of a single fertilized egg." Jessica left the clinic in a complete daze. The job opening was forgotten. Her thoughts were in turmoil. What would she do now? How would she raise 3 children alone? When she got back to Sarah's apartment, she found her friend preparing dinner. "How was the interview?" Sarah asked cheerfully. Jessica sat at the kitchen table, unable to answer right away. Her world had been turned upside down twice, in less than a month. "I'm pregnant, sir," she finally said, her voice barely a whisper. "With triplets." Her friend dropped the spoon she was holding. "You're what?" "Triplets, 3 babies, Michael's." Sarah sat beside her, stunned. "My God, Jessica, what are you going to do?" The question hung in the air for a long moment as Jessica considered her options. Should she call Michael? Tell him? He had the right to know he was going to be a father. But after the public humiliation, after being thrown out like a criminal, did he deserve to know? After a sleepless night, Jessica decided that regardless of the bad feelings, Michael had the right to know about the children. The next morning, she gathered her courage and picked up her phone. Her hands shook as she dialed the number she knew by heart. The phone rang several times before someone answered. To her surprise, it wasn't Michael's voice she heard, but a young, cheerful female voice. "Hello, Thompson residence." Jessica's stomach twisted. Less than a month after she left, was there already another woman answering Michael's phone? Before she could respond, she heard Michael's unmistakable laughter in the background, followed by muffled conversation and more feminine giggles. "Hello, is anyone there?" insisted the voice on the other end of the line. Jessica hung up without saying a word. Tears streamed down her face as a sense of betrayal overwhelmed her. He had accused her of infidelity when, in truth, it was likely him who was having an affair. Never again, she promised herself, her hand unconsciously resting on her still flat belly. "He will never know about you. It'll just be the 4 of us against the world." That same afternoon, Jessica received a call that would change the course of her life. A small business consulting firm in Boston, the American agricultural capital, was interested in her resume for an administrative assistant position. "Could you start immediately?" asked the recruiter. Jessica didn't hesitate. "Yes, I can start next week." It would be a fresh start, a new city, far from painful, memories far from Michael and his betrayal. A place where no one knew her story, where she could raise her children without the shadow of the past. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. 3 days later, Jessica said goodbye to Sarah at the bus station. "Are you sure this is what you want to do?" her friend asked, concerned. "You're pregnant with triplets, Jessica. You'll need help." "I need a new beginning, sir," she replied firmly. "I can't stay in New York City, not after everything that happened." "Promise you'll call me if you need anything," Sarah insisted, hugging her tightly. "I promise." The bus to Boston departed shortly after. As she watched the urban landscape of New York City gradually give way to the countryside's fields, Jessica gently stroked her belly, thinking of the 3 little lives growing inside her. It would be a difficult journey, she knew that, but she was determined to give them everything she could. Boston was a prosperous city, known as the American agricultural capital. Jessica rented a small one-bedroom apartment in Williamsburg with the advance she received from the company. Horizon Consulting was a modest firm with only 15 employees, specializing in consulting for small and mid-sized businesses in the region. Her boss, Robert Anderson, was a serious, discreet, middle-aged man. In the early days, Jessica kept her pregnancy a secret, fearing it might jeopardize her permanent hire after the probationary period. But after 2 months at the company, when her belly began to show, she decided it was time to tell him. "Mr. Anderson, could I speak with you for a moment?" she asked after knocking on his office door. "Of course, Jessica, come in." She sat in the chair across from his desk, nervous. "Mr. Anderson, there's something I need to tell you," she began, taking a deep breath. "I'm pregnant." The man looked at her for a moment before responding. "I'd already noticed, Jessica. Congratulations." She blinked, surprised by his calmness. "Actually, I'm expecting triplets." That caught Robert off guard. His eyes widened behind his glasses. "Triplets? That's extraordinary. I know this might complicate my position at the company, but I assure you I'm dedicated and—" "Jessica," he interrupted, raising a hand. "Your competence has already been clear in the short time you've been with us. Pregnancy, whether it's 1, 2, or 3 babies, doesn't change that." A wave of relief washed over her. "Thank you, Mr. Anderson. I just want to know if you have a support system here in Boston. Family? Friends?" Jessica hesitated before answering. "No, sir. I came to the city alone." Robert looked at her with an expression that mixed concern and admiration. "You're a brave woman, Jessica. If you need any flexibility in your schedule for medical appointments or any other needs, we're here to help." That conversation was the first moment since leaving New York City that Jessica felt that maybe, just maybe, things could work out. The following months were about adjustment and preparation. Her belly grew at a frightening pace, and by 5 months, Jessica looked ready to give birth. Prenatal checkups at the state health program confirmed that all 3 babies were boys and seemed to be developing well, despite the high-risk pregnancy. "You need to rest as much as possible, Jessica," the obstetrician advised during one appointment. "A triplet pregnancy requires extra care." But rest was a luxury Jessica couldn't afford. She kept working, saving every penny she earned. She bought 3 second-hand cribs, baby clothes from thrift stores, and turned her small apartment into a cozy nest for her children. During this time, Horizon Consulting faced a crisis. One of its biggest clients, an agricultural equipment manufacturer, was considering terminating their contract due to financial troubles. In a tense meeting while Robert and the other senior consultants debated alternatives, Jessica, who was just taking notes, had an idea. "Excuse me," she said, gathering her courage. "I know it's not my place to speak, but what if we offered a different consulting model?" The room fell silent, all eyes on her. "Go on, Jessica," Robert encouraged, always open to new ideas. "Instead of charging a fixed monthly fee, we could propose a results-based model. We take a percentage of the actual revenue increase our consulting generates. That way, they wouldn't have a fixed cost during a crisis, and we'd show confidence in our own work." The silence lingered for a few seconds until Robert smiled. "That's brilliant, Jessica. A truly innovative idea." The proposal was implemented, not just for that client, but as a new business model for the company. Within months, the client base grew significantly, drawn by the trust the new approach demonstrated. Robert began inviting Jessica to participate more actively in strategic meetings, valuing her sharp business insight. Even with her belly growing larger, she threw herself into work, knowing she'd need financial stability to raise 3 children alone. At 7 months pregnant, Jessica received a letter that reopened wounds just beginning to heal. The envelope contained documents from a law firm in New York City. Michael was filing for divorce, citing abandonment. The cold, impersonal text made no mention of her expulsion, nor did it ask about her whereabouts or well-being. It was as if their 3-year marriage had never existed, as if she were just an inconvenience to be removed from his life. With trembling hands, Jessica signed the papers. There was no dispute over assets. She had left with only the clothes on her back. No mention of child support. He didn't know about the babies. It was the official end of a painful chapter in her life. The next day, sitting at her desk at the consulting firm, Jessica got an unexpected call. "Mrs. Parker, this is St. Luke's Maternity Hospital. You need to come immediately. Your friend Sarah Olson was in an accident and was brought here." Jessica's world stopped. Sarah was in Boston, injured. "I'm on my way now," she replied, grabbing her purse and rushing out of the office. At the hospital, she was told Sarah had been in a car accident on the highway connecting New York City to Boston. She had been coming to visit when a truck lost control and collided with her vehicle. "How is she?" asked Jessica, desperate. "She's in surgery right now," the nurse explained. "She asked us to notify you before she went into the operating room. Said it was important." Jessica waited for hours in the cold hospital hallway, rubbing her enormous belly while praying for her friend's recovery. It was in this moment of extreme vulnerability that she felt the first contractions. "No, not now," she murmured, trying to calm herself. "You need to wait a few more weeks, my little ones." But the triplets had other plans. The contractions grew in frequency and intensity until Jessica could no longer ignore them. She called a nurse who immediately took her to the obstetric emergency. "You're in premature labor," the doctor confirmed after examining her. "The babies are coming." The next few hours were a chaotic whirlwind of pain, fear, and worry. Jessica was alone in the delivery room, with no one to hold her hand, no one to comfort her. She thought of Sarah somewhere in that same hospital, fighting for her life. She thought of the children who were coming into the world far too soon. After a difficult delivery, she heard the faint cry of the first baby, followed by the second and finally the third. 3 tiny boys with just a few wisps of blonde hair were briefly placed on her chest before being rushed to the NICU. "They need special care," the doctor explained. "They were born at 32 weeks. They're underweight, but they're strong. They'll be fine." Jessica, exhausted and emotional, watched as her 3 sons were taken away. She then realized she hadn't even chosen names for them yet. The next morning, after a night of recovery, Jessica was wheeled to the NICU. Her 3 sons were in separate incubators, small and fragile, with tubes and sensors attached to their tiny bodies. "How are my babies?" she asked the neonatologist. "They're stable, which is already excellent news for premature triplets," the doctor replied with a gentle smile. "They have strong lungs, which is crucial at this stage." Jessica studied the 3 identical faces, so small and perfect. They were the exact image of Michael as a baby. She had seen the photos at her in-laws' house. The same delicate nose, the same few strands of blonde hair, the same dimple in the chin. "Do they have names yet?" the doctor asked. Jessica thought for a moment. She wanted strong names, ones that symbolized the journey ahead of them. "Yes," she finally answered. "Ethan, Matthew, and Gabriel, my little warriors." After visiting her sons, Jessica asked about Sarah. She was told her friend had survived the surgery, but was in critical condition in the ICU. "Can I see her?" she asked. "Just 5 minutes," the nurse agreed. "She's sedated and won't respond, but she can hear you." When she entered the adult ICU, Jessica barely recognized Sarah. Her always vibrant, full-of-life friend was pale, hooked up to machines, with bandages covering much of her body. "Oh, Sar," she whispered, clutching her friend's limp hand. "Why were you coming to see me? What was so important?" At that moment, a nurse entered the room carrying a bag. "These are the patient's belongings," she said. "There was a letter addressed to you in her coat pocket. I thought you might want to see it." Jessica took the crumpled envelope and opened it with trembling fingers. Inside was a hastily written letter and a few newspaper clippings. "Jessica, I need to see you urgently. Michael found out where you are. He hired a detective after you didn't respond to the divorce papers the first time. He's coming to Boston. I'm coming to warn you in person because I couldn't reach you by phone. Be careful. Love, Sarah." The newspaper clippings were from society columns in New York City. In one of them, there was a photo of Michael at a charity event, accompanied by a young blonde woman. The caption read, "Businessman Michael Thompson and his new girlfriend, Victoria Reynolds, during a charity dinner at the Plaza Hotel." Jessica felt a tightness in her chest. So he had really replaced her quickly. The voice on the phone, the laughter, it all made sense now. But her biggest worry was something else. Michael had discovered her whereabouts and was coming to Boston. What would he do if he found out about the triplets? Would he try to take her children? With his power and money, he would certainly have an advantage in any legal battle. At that moment, looking at her unconscious friend who had risked her life to warn her, Jessica made a decision. She wouldn't let Michael reappear in her life and threaten the small family she was building with so much sacrifice. The next day, as she recovered in the hospital and her babies fought in the incubators, she received an unexpected visit. Jessica. It was Robert Anderson, her boss, standing at the door with a bouquet of flowers. "I heard what happened. How are you?" "Robert," she replied, surprised. "The babies were born premature, but they're fighting. The doctor says they're strong." The man stepped closer, placing the flowers on the table beside the bed. "And how are you?" It was the kind question, the tone of genuine concern that made Jessica break down. Between tears, she told Robert everything. The abusive marriage, the expulsion, the discovery of her pregnancy, her decision to start over alone, and now the threat from her ex-husband. Robert listened silently, his eyes revealing a mix of compassion and indignation. "You're the bravest person I've ever met, Jessica," he said when she finished her story. "And I want to help you." "How?" "Our company has a branch in Denver. I can transfer you there with a better position and a higher salary. A fresh start in a city where your ex-husband won't find you." Jessica was speechless at the generous offer. "But what about the babies? They'll need to stay in the NICU for weeks, maybe months. When they're discharged, we'll be ready for the transfer," Robert assured her. "In the meantime, you can work remotely as much as you're able. I've seen your potential, Jessica. You have a unique eye for business. In fact, I was already thinking of offering you a promotion before all this happened." For the first time in a long while, Jessica felt a spark of hope. Maybe, just maybe, she could build a decent life for her children, far from Michael's shadow. The following weeks were a mix of pain, fear, and determination. The triplets slowly gained weight, but their condition was stable. Sarah remained in a coma, fighting for her life, and Jessica divided her time between the hospital and remote work, preparing for the move to Denver. By the time they were a month old, Ethan, Matthew, and Gabriel were out of the incubators, though they still needed medical observation. Jessica could hold them in her arms, nurse them, and begin forming the bond that would be the foundation of their family. It was during one of these visits to the NICU that she nearly ran into Michael. She was leaving the hospital when she saw, reflected in the glass door, her ex-husband entering the lobby with a blonde woman. Instinctively, she hid behind a pillar, her heart racing. "We're looking for information about a patient." She heard the familiar voice say to the receptionist, "Jessica Parker. We heard she was admitted here recently." "I'm sorry, sir, but I can't provide that information," the receptionist replied, following protocol. "I'm her husband," Michael insisted, his voice taking on that authoritative tone Jessica knew so well. "Even so, we'd need authorization from the patient or a court order," the receptionist answered firmly. Jessica took advantage of the argument to slip away to the elevator and go back up to the NICU. There she explained the situation to the head nurse, who immediately called hospital security. "Don't worry," the nurse assured her. "No one will see your children without your permission, and we can arrange for you to leave through a secondary exit when you need to go." That night, in her small rented apartment, Jessica made a drastic decision. She couldn't wait any longer for the babies to be officially discharged. Michael was in the city looking for her. It was only a matter of time before he found out about the triplets. The next morning, she went straight to speak with the neonatologist. "Doctor, I need to know honestly, are my children at any serious risk if they're discharged now?" The doctor studied her carefully before answering. "They're doing very well, Jessica. They've gained enough weight and have no respiratory issues. Under normal circumstances, I'd keep them under observation for 2 more weeks, but is something going on?" Jessica briefly explained the situation without going into personal details. "I see," the doctor said thoughtfully. "I can discharge the babies tomorrow. on the condition that you schedule regular follow-ups in Denver. Thank you, doctor. You don't know how much this means to us. The next morning, while Michael continued searching for her in Boston, Jessica left the city in an ambulance arranged by Horizon Consulting with 3 small but healthy babies, heading toward a new life in Denver. Denver welcomed the little family with a mild autumn. The apartment Robert had arranged for her was in a neighborhood close to the company's new headquarters. It was larger than the one in Boston, with 2 bedrooms, one for her and one for the triplets. The adjustment was tough. Caring for 3 newborns alone was a Herculean challenge. Jessica slept only a few hours each night, broken into short naps between feedings and diaper changes. During the day, she tried to work remotely while the babies slept. It was Robert who suggested a solution. "Jessica, you need help," he said during a visit to her home. "I know a woman who can babysit during the day. She's trustworthy. She raised my children." Mrs. Johnson, a 60-year-old woman with a kind smile and hands calloused from rocking many babies, became the family's guardian angel. With her help, Jessica could return to the office, devote herself to the work she loved, and know her children were in good hands. The Denver branch of Horizon Consulting was smaller than the headquarters, but Jessica quickly stood out. Her innovative ideas, tireless dedication, and sharp business sense impressed not only Robert, but also the other partners. One Friday afternoon, 6 months after her arrival in Denver, Jessica was called into the conference room. There she found Robert and the 2 other partners. "Jessica, we'd like to make you an offer," Robert began. "You've transformed our Denver operations. Clients adore you, your insights have been invaluable, and your work ethic is exemplary." She waited curiously as he continued. "We'd like to offer you a stake in the company, 10% to start, with the potential for more based on performance." Jessica was speechless. From administrative assistant to partner in less than 2 years. It was more than she'd ever dreamed. "I don't know what to say," she murmured, moved. "Say yes," Robert smiled. "You deserve this, Jessica. We trust your vision for the company's future." It was the start of a new chapter. With her partnership came a significantly higher salary, allowing Jessica to move into a more spacious home in a tree-lined neighborhood. The triplets, now almost a year old, were growing strong and healthy, filling the house with laughter and little mischief. Meanwhile, in New York City, Michael had finally given up searching for her. The divorce was finalized in her absence, and he moved on with his life, never knowing about the 3 children born from that turbulent marriage. Jessica Parker kept in regular contact with Sarah, who had recovered from the accident after months of physical therapy. Her friend was the only connection she maintained to her past life. "He married that Victoria," Sarah shared during a phone call. "It was a lavish wedding, covered in all the society columns, but there are rumors the family business is facing financial troubles." Jessica felt no satisfaction in her ex-husband's struggles, but she couldn't deny a certain sense of poetic justice. The man who had humiliated her and thrown her out of the house was now facing his own trials. She focused on her new life. Under her leadership, the Denver branch of Horizon Consulting grew exponentially. New clients were drawn to its reputation for innovation and concrete results. In just 2 years, the small branch had become more profitable than the headquarters in Boston. By the time the triplets turned 3, Jessica was already known in Denver's business circles as the Iron Lady, a nickname that emerged from her unique blend of empathy and firmness in negotiations. Her story of resilience, though stripped of the personal details she kept private, inspired women entrepreneurs across the state. Ethan, Matthew, and Gabriel grew like typical boys their age, full of energy and curiosity. They were identical, not just in appearance, blonde hair, blue eyes, the same mischievous smile, but also in the outgoing, determined personalities they had inherited from both their mother and their absent father. At home, Jessica often watched them play and wondered if she had made the right decision keeping Michael out of their lives. The boys occasionally asked about their father, and she answered with half-truths, saying he lived far away and couldn't be with them. Those questions became more frequent when they started kindergarten and noticed other children had fathers in their lives. "Mommy, why don't we have a daddy like Peter?" Gabriel asked one evening at dinner. Jessica's heart tightened. How could she explain such complexity to 3 4-year-olds? "You do have a father, sweetheart," she replied, choosing her words carefully. "But sometimes families are different. Some have a mommy and daddy living together. Others just have a mommy, or just a daddy, or 2 mommies, or 2 daddies." "Where is our daddy?" Matthew pressed. "He lives in another city," she answered, staying as close to the truth as possible. "Doesn't he like us?" asked Ethan, the most sensitive of the 3. Jessica felt tears in her eyes. "It's not that, my love, it's complicated. When you're older, I'll explain better, I promise." The conversation left her unsettled. She was depriving her children of knowing their father, and depriving Michael of knowing his sons. No matter how much he had hurt her, maybe it wasn't fair to extend that pain to the children. But before she could dwell on it further, a new opportunity arose. Robert called an extraordinary partners meeting. "I have an important proposal," he announced. "Our growth has been extraordinary these past few years, especially in Denver thanks to Jessica's work. I think it's time we take the next step. Turn Horizon Consulting into a national business group." The idea was ambitious: to open branches in other major cities, expand the range of services to include not just consulting, but also executive training, management software, and even an investment fund for startups. "And I'd like to propose that Jessica lead this expansion as CEO of the Horizon Group," concluded Robert, to everyone's surprise, including hers. In the months that followed, Jessica barely had time to think about personal matters. Transforming the small consulting firm into a corporate group demanded all her energy and focus. She traveled constantly, evaluating potential acquisitions, hiring teams for new branches, and developing the new corporate identity. By the time the triplets turned 5, the Horizon Group already had offices in New York City, Los Angeles, Chicago, and Miami, in addition to its original operations in Boston and Denver. Jessica Parker had become a respected name in the American corporate world, often featured in articles about female entrepreneurship and business innovation. With success came material benefits. The family moved into a spacious home in a high-end gated community, complete with a pool, sports court, and 24-hour security. The boys attended the best bilingual school in town, taking swimming, music, and judo lessons. But professional success came at a cost. Long work hours and frequent business trips meant less time with her children than Jessica would have liked. Mrs. Johnson remained a constant presence in the boys' lives, along with a team of professionals who helped with daily care. On a cold, winter morning in Denver, as Jessica prepared for yet another trip to New York City, she received a call from Sarah. "Jessica, you need to see this week's issue of Business magazine," her friend said without even a hello. "Good morning to you too, sir," Jessica teased. "What's so special about this article? It's about the 50 most innovative business leaders in America, and guess who's on the list?" Jessica smiled, used to her friend's exaggerated praise. "Let me guess, me. Yes, you're in 3rd place, but that's not all, and Michael is also on the list." Jessica's smile faded. "Michael? What do you mean?" "Seems he made a comeback. After his family's company nearly went bankrupt, he started a financial tech startup that's revolutionizing the market. It's called NextFin." Jessica knew NextFin. In fact, she had considered acquiring it to integrate into the Horizon Group's portfolio, unaware that Michael was behind it. "There's more," Sarah continued. "He divorced that Victoria last year. The marriage lasted less than 3 years." Jessica didn't know how to feel. After 7 years, she had built a completely new life, far from Michael and the painful past. Her children were growing up happy and healthy. Her career had flourished beyond her wildest expectations. But there were still moments, usually late at night when the boys were asleep and the house was quiet, when she wondered if she had made the right choice. Did the triplets deserve to know their father? Did Michael deserve to know about his sons? Life answered that question before Jessica could make a decision. At the Business Award of the Year ceremony in New York City, Jessica Parker, now 35 and elegant in a black pantsuit with a white blouse, took the stage to accept the Executive of the Year trophy. Her journey from administrative assistant to CEO of one of the country's fastest-growing corporate groups had impressed the judges. As she finished her acceptance speech and stepped off the stage, she was approached by a man she hadn't seen in 7 years. "Jessica," Michael said, looking just as surprised as she was by the encounter. "I didn't expect to see you here." He had aged well. A few wrinkles at the corners of his eyes, a touch of grey at his temples, but he was still the handsome, charismatic man she had fallen for so many years ago. Yet there was something different in his eyes. The youthful arrogance had given way to something deeper, more mature. "Michael," she replied, maintaining her composure despite her racing. "Hart, congratulations on your award." He had received the Technological Innovation of the Year trophy for his company, Next Fin. "Thank you. Your speech was inspiring. You built something incredible from scratch." It was strange, this polite and distant conversation between two people who had once shared a life, a home, a bed. "How have you been?" he asked, breaking the uncomfortable silence. "I'm fine," Jessica answered curtly. "Excuse me, I need to find my team." As she turned to leave, she felt his hand on her arm. "Jessica, wait. I know I have no right to ask this, but could we talk? There are things I need to say." She hesitated. What could possibly be said after all this time? What remained between them but hurt and resentment? "Maybe another time," she replied politely but firmly, freeing her arm and walking away. The next morning, back in Denver, Jessica was trying to focus on a video call when her assistant interrupted her. "Ms. Parker, I'm sorry to interrupt, but there's a man in the lobby insisting on seeing you. He says it's important." "Who is it?" "Michael Thompson, from Next Fin." Jessica's stomach dropped. He had followed her to Denver. Why? "Tell him I'm in a meeting. Ask him to schedule an appointment for another day." But 15 minutes later, the assistant returned. "He insists it's urgent and says he won't leave until he speaks with you." Irritation replaced her initial surprise. Michael's audacity was typical, always used to getting what he wanted. "Fine, tell him I have 5 minutes." When Michael entered her office, Jessica remained behind her desk, creating a physical and psychological barrier between them. "What's so urgent, Michael?" He looked nervous, a rare sight for the usually confident businessman. "Last night, after the event, I went to the hotel bar for a whiskey. There was a TV on with a local Denver news report." Jessica waited, unsure where he was going with this. It was a story about a school that had won an environmental education award. They showed the kids celebrating in the yard. A chill ran down Jessica's spine. She knew exactly which report he had seen. The Triplets school had won a major award, and the three of them, always noticeable for being identical, had briefly appeared on TV. "I saw 3 boys," Michael continued, his voice trembling slightly. "3 identical boys, about 5 or 6 years old, with blonde hair and—" "What do you want, Michael?" she interrupted, panic rising. "They're my sons, aren't they?" he asked directly. Jessica didn't answer, but her silence was answer enough. "Why, Jessica?" His voice was full of pain. "Why did you hide this from me all these years?" "You have the nerve to ask me that," she shot back, the anger from 7 years ago flaring up again. "After you threw me out of the house like I was a criminal? After you humiliated me in front of everyone? After you didn't even try to find me?" "I did try," he fired back. "I hired a private investigator who tracked you down in Boston. I went there to look for you. Yes, months later when you were already with another woman." Her words were venomous. "I called you, Michael. I called to tell you about the pregnancy, and a woman answered. I heard your laughter in the background." His expression changed, as if struck by sudden understanding. "When was this?" "A few weeks after you threw me out. She was my sister," he said, running his hand through his hair in frustration. "Jennifer came to stay with me because I wasn't doing well, Jessica. After the anger passed, I realized what I had done. I tried calling you, but you had changed your number. I searched with friends and family. No one knew where you were." Jessica stared at him, incredulous. "And the divorce papers? You accused me of abandoning our home." "That was my lawyer. I was devastated, drowning in work and alcohol. I barely read the papers before signing." He paused. "I'm not making excuses, Jessica. What I did was unforgivable. But for God's sake, you hid my children from me for 7 years." The heavy silence that followed was interrupted by the phone. "Mrs. Parker, your driver is here to take you to the airport," the assistant announced over the intercom. "Thank you, Karen. I'll be down in 5 minutes," Jessica replied, grateful for the interruption. She looked at Michael, who seemed devastated. "I have to go. My flight to Los Angeles is in an hour." "Jessica, please," he begged. "I want to meet them. They're my children." She hesitated. Part of her wanted to deny him that right, wanted to punish him for all the pain he had caused. But another part, the part that saw the sadness in the Eeks, boys' eyes whenever they asked about their father, knew this punishment would hurt the innocent more than the guilty. "I'll think about it," she finally said. "Right now I need to go." "How long will you be away?" 3 days. He nodded, visibly controlling his emotions. "I'll be in Denver until the end of the week, staying at the Royal Hotel. Please, Jessica, I just want to meet them." She gave a slight nod, making no verbal commitment, and picked up her briefcase. "Walk me to the elevator, please," she requested, professional and distant. In the elevator, descending side by side in silence, Jessica reflected on how her life had turned upside down in less than 24 hours. After 7 years building a life, completely separate from Michael, there he was about to re-enter her life, and more importantly, the lives of her children. "Do they know about me?" Michael asked, breaking the silence as the elevator descended. "They know they have a father who lives far away," she replied, watching the digital floor display. "I don't go into details, they're still too young." "What are they like?" His voice was almost a whisper. Jessica couldn't help a small smile. "They're incredible. Smart, energetic, affectionate, and identical down to the smallest details. Sometimes only I can tell them apart." The elevator reached the lobby and the doors opened. "Jessica," Michael called as she stepped out. "Thank you for not saying." "Oh, right away." She nodded and walked to the exit, where her driver waited beside the company's black limousine. During her 3 days in Los Angeles, in meetings with new business partners, Jessica couldn't shake thoughts of her encounter with Michael and what it would mean for her children. The night before returning to Denver, in her hotel room, she picked up her phone and opened the photo gallery. She spent hours looking at pictures of the boys. First steps, first teeth, first words, birthdays, Christmases, beach trips. 7 years of memories Michael had missed. 7 years he'd never get back. As much as she resented him, as justified, as her actions had been at the time now, with the emotional distance time had given her, she could see she had deprived both father and sons of a relationship that might have meant everything to them. Back in Denver, her first stop was the boys' school. After picking them up, instead of heading straight home as usual, she asked the driver to take them to an ice cream shop in Central Park. Seated at the table with their chocolate ice creams, the triplets looked curiously at their mother, who seemed strangely nervous. "Boys, Mommy needs to talk to you about something important," she began, carefully choosing her words. "Are you going to travel again?" asked Matthew, always the most direct of the three. "No, it's not that," she smiled. "It's about your father." The three immediately stopped eating their ice cream, their full attention now on her. "You always ask about him, don't you? And I always say he lives far away," continued Jessica. "Is he coming to visit us?" asked Gabriel, his blue eyes shining with anticipation. Jessica took a deep breath. "He's already here in Denver, and he really wants to meet you." The three boys erupted with simultaneous questions, excited and curious. They wanted to know what he was like, what he did, why he had never visited. Before, if he liked playing soccer, if he had been to other countries, if he had a cool car. Jessica answered what she could, keeping her explanations simple and positive, avoiding any mention of the painful events of the past. "When can we meet him?" asked Ethan finally. "If you want, we can arrange it for tomorrow," she replied, watching her son's reactions closely. The three agreed enthusiastically, already making plans about what they would show their father, which toys they'd share and which stories they'd tell. That night, after tucking them into bed, Jessica picked up the phone and dialed the number. Michael had left. "Hi," she said when he answered. "I talked to them. They're excited to meet you." "Thank you, Jessica," he replied, his voice thick with emotion. "You don't know what this means to me. Tomorrow at 10 a.m. at the park near our house. I'll text you the address," she said, keeping her voice steady and professional. "I'll be there." The night was sleepless for Jessica. 1,000 thoughts raced through her head. What if Michael wasn't a good father? What if he wanted to file for shared custody? What if the boys were disappointed? What if he went back to New York City and left them heartbroken? But beneath all those fears, there was a growing feeling that she was doing the right thing. Ethan, Matthew, and Gabriel deserved to know their father. And Michael, despite his past mistakes, deserved to know his sons. The next morning, the sun shone brightly on a rare, cloudless day in Denver. Jessica dressed the boys meticulously, beige, pants, white shirts, comfortable shoes, and took them to Central Park, one of the city's largest and most beautiful parks. As the three ran around the playground, burning off their excess energy, she spotted Michael arriving right at 10 a.m. He looked nervous, his hands in his pockets, his anxious gaze scanning the park. "He's here," Jessica told the boys discreetly, pointing in his direction. The three stopped playing and looked where she indicated, suddenly shy. "He looks like us," observed Ethan, always the most perceptive. "Yes, you look a lot like him," Jessica confirmed, feeling a lump in her throat. Michael approached slowly, as if afraid they might disappear if he moved too fast. When he was close enough, he knelt to be at the boy's eye level. "Hi," he said, his voice trembling slightly. "I'm Michael, your father." The triplets looked at him, then at Jessica, who nodded encouragingly and then back at Michael. "I'm Ethan," said the first, stepping forward. "I'm Matthew," followed the second. "And I'm Gabriel," finished the third. Michael looked at each of them, his eyes misty, trying to memorize every detail of their identical faces, searching for small differences to help him tell them apart. You're amazing," he said finally, unable to find better words. The boys, with the natural ease typical of children, quickly overcame their initial shyness. Soon they were showing Michael their favorite toys in the park, talking about school, their friends, and the places they'd visited with their mother. Jessica watched the scene from a nearby bench, conflicting emotions battling inside her. Seeing her children interacting with their father for the first time was a moment she'd never imagined experiencing. There was so much genuine joy in their eyes, so much curiosity and openness. After nearly an hour of playing, Michael approached the bench where she sat. "They're extraordinary, Jessica," he said, looking at the boys now playing on the slide. "You've done an incredible job." "Thank you," she replied, uncomfortable with the praise coming from him. "I know I have no right to ask for anything," Michael continued, sitting beside her, "but I'd like to be part of their lives, if you'll allow it. I don't want to be the distant father they never knew anymore." Jessica studied him for a long moment before answering. "They deserve to have a present father," she said finally. "But you need to understand something. My priority has always been and always will be them. If this is something you truly want, it can't be a passing whim. They've already spent 7 years without a father. It would be cruel to introduce them to you, only to see them abandoned again." "I won't abandon them," he promised fervently. "I know I don't deserve your trust, but I give you my word I'll be the best father I can for them." Jessica nodded slowly. "We'll see with time," she said pragmatically. "For now, we can start with regular visits. If all goes well, we can move to days when they stay with you, maybe even some weekends in New York City when they're a little older." "Thank you, Jessica," Michael said, visibly moved. "It's more than I expected, more than I deserve." The two watched their children in silence for a few minutes, each lost in their own thoughts until the boys came running over, eager to show something new to the father they'd just met. In the weeks that followed, Michael became a constant presence in the triplets' lives. He rented an apartment in Denver so he could visit them regularly. His company in New York City ran smoothly under his partner's management, allowing him to split his time between the two cities. Jessica observed this new relationship with caution and gradually with reluctant acceptance. Michael proved to be a thoughtful and dedicated father, making an effort to learn the boys' routines, attend school events, take them on outings, and read bedtime stories. One day, as the four of them played soccer in the yard, Jessica watched. From the porch, there was something about the scene that moved her deeply, the joy on her children's faces, the patience and love evident in Michael, the natural way they had connected, as if the 7 years of absence had never existed. That night, after putting the boys to bed, she found Michael in the living room, ready to leave. "They'll be asleep in 5 minutes," she remarked, breaking the silence. "They were exhausted after all that soccer." "Sorry if I overdid it," he smiled, grabbing his coat. "I get carried away with them." "It's fine," Jessica assured him. "They love all that energy." Michael headed for the door but stopped before leaving. "Jessica, I know there's still so much between us that needs to be resolved. So much pain, so many misunderstandings, but I want you to know I deeply regret what I did. The way I treated you, I was young, arrogant, insecure, but that's no excuse." She looked at him, surprised by the sincerity in his voice. "Why were you insecure? You had everything. Money, social, status, respect." He gave a sad smile. "I had everything except self-confidence. I always felt like I was living in my father's shadow, trying to prove my worth. When I met you, I couldn't believe someone like you could truly love me for who I was, not for what I had or represented. Deep down, I always expected you to betray me or leave me. So you decided to push me away before it could happen," she concluded, beginning to understand. "Something like that," he admitted. "Like I said, it's not an excuse, just a late explanation." At that moment, something shifted between them. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but perhaps the beginning of understanding, the first step on a long road to healing for both of them. Over the following months, while living separate lives yet connected through their children, Jessica and Michael slowly rebuilt something resembling a friendship. They talked about the boys' school, their different personalities despite looking identical, and their hopes and plans for their future. Sometimes, when Michael came over for dinner with the boys, the four of them sat at the table like a family. Not the family they had been or could have been, but a new arrangement that somehow worked. One evening, after the boys had gone to bed, Michael and Jessica talked on the porch, each with a glass of wine. "I'm thinking of permanently relocating NextFin's headquarters to Denver," he mentioned. "Really? What about your business?" "In New York City? It can be managed remotely with occasional visits," he explained. "The boys are here. This is where I want to be too." Jessica nodded, understanding. In 7 years, her life had taken turns she never imagined. From a humiliated wife to a successful businesswoman, from a desperate single mother to the balanced leader of an unconventional family. And now, watching Michael, the man she had once loved and later hated with equal intensity, she felt something different. It wasn't love, not yet, and maybe it never would be again. But there was respect, understanding, and most importantly, peace. The triplets would turn 7 the following month. 7 years of life for them, 7 years of journey for her. And as the sun set over Denver, Jessica Parker allowed herself, for the first time in a long while, to feel hope for the future. Not just for her children, but for herself too. She thought about everything that had brought her to this moment. The public humiliation, the discovery of her pregnancy, the fresh start in another city, the building of a business empire. And now, Michael's return to her life through the children they shared. It hadn't been an easy path, but every step, every tear, every sleepless night had been worth it. Because in the end, her story wasn't about revenge or bitterness. It was about overcoming and starting anew. And as night fell over the city she now called home, Jessica knew that no matter what the future held, she was ready to face it. No longer as the frightened young woman she once was, but as the strong, successful, and whole woman she had become. Jessica watched the 3 boys playing in the yard of her Denver home. Ethan and Gabriel ran in circles, shouting excitedly, while Matthew sat in the shade of a tree, flipping through a picture book. The triplets had just turned 7, and despite their identical looks, the same blonde hair, the same piercing blue eyes, the same charming smile, their personalities couldn't have been more different. Ethan was the natural leader, always taking charge in games and adventures. Gabriel, the most sociable, made friends with impressive ease, and Matthew, the quiet and observant one, preferred books and puzzles to his brother's roughhousing. Lately it was Matthew who worried Jessica the most. "Matthew, it's time for your medicine," she called, walking over with a glass of water and a pill in hand. The boy stood up obediently and walked toward his mother. His breathing was slightly labored even after sitting for so long. "I'm tired, Mom," he said after swallowing his medicine. Jessica felt a tightness in her chest, seeing the paleness in her son's face. Over the past few months, Matthew had been showing concerning symptoms: constant fatigue, shortness of breath during light physical activity, and occasional chest pains. After several tests, doctors had identified a congenital heart condition that would need close monitoring. "Why don't you rest a bit before lunch?" she suggested, stroking the boy's soft hair. "I'll call your brothers to come inside too." As Matthew headed into the house, Jessica glanced at the clock. In 2 hours, they had an appointment with cardiologist Dr. James Wilson, one of the country's top pediatric cardiology specialists. The past few weeks had been tense, with additional tests and conflicting medical opinions about the best course of treatment. During lunch, Jessica watched the 3 boys carefully. Ethan and Gabriel devoured their spaghetti with bolognese sauce, while Matthew ate slowly, with little appetite. She tried her best not to show worry, but it was hard to hide her anxiety about the afternoon appointment. "Kids, remember we have an appointment with Dr. James today," she said, keeping her voice light. "Afterward, we can stop by the ice cream. Shop at the mall, how does that sound?" "I want chocolate with nuts," Gabriel exclaimed immediately. "I prefer strawberry," said Ethan. Matthew just smiled, not showing the same excitement as his brothers. He knew the appointment was mostly for him, though his mother always took all 3 together so he wouldn't feel different. The traffic in Denver was particularly heavy that afternoon. Jessica drove her BMW convertible carefully, while the boys chatted animatedly in the back seat. Even after becoming a successful businesswoman with a driver at her disposal, she preferred to drive herself when it came to her children's appointments. Dr. James's clinic was in a modern building in the Upper East Side, one of the city's most upscale areas. After parking, Jessica adjusted her impeccable women's suit, a signature look since she took over as president of Horizon Group, and led the 3 boys to the reception. The appointment began promptly at 3 in the afternoon. Dr. James, a middle-aged man with kind eyes behind thin-framed glasses, greeted all 4 with the familiarity of someone who had been treating them for months. "So how are we doing today, Matthew?" he asked, gesturing to the chair in front of him. "I'm okay," the boy replied, as shy as ever. Jessica sat beside him while Ethan and Gabriel entertained themselves with the tablets the clinic provided for patients' siblings. "He still gets tired easily, doctor," Jessica informed him. "And last night he woke up saying his chest hurt." The doctor nodded, making notes on his tablet. "The latest test results came in," he said, turning the screen so Jessica could see. "Matthew's condition is a bit more complex than we initially thought." Jessica felt her heart race. "What exactly does that mean?" "The septal defect is larger than it appeared in the first tests, and there's mild mitral valve insufficiency." The doctor explained the boy's heart condition in simple terms, using illustrations on the tablet to show where the problems were. Jessica listened carefully, trying to absorb every detail, every term, every implication for her son's future. "As for next steps," Dr. James continued after the detailed explanation, "we have a few options to consider." Matthew looked from one to the other, clearly frightened even if he didn't fully understand what was being discussed. Jessica held his hand, offering reassurance. "For now, we can continue with the medication treatment, which is keeping the condition stable, but we need to consider that eventually surgical intervention might be necessary." "Surgery?" Jessica's voice wavered slightly. "Not immediately," the doctor assured, "but it's something we should keep in mind for the future." It was then that Dr. James made a suggestion that would change the course of Jessica's and her children's lives. "It would help if we had the complete family history, especially on the paternal side," he remarked gently. "Congenital heart conditions often have a genetic component. Knowing about the grandparents' or uncle's health, or even the father's, could help us develop a more precise strategy." Jessica felt as if the ground had vanished beneath her feet. In 7 years, she had never faced this situation. The triplets occasionally asked about their father, and she answered with half-truths that satisfied them temporarily. But now Matthew's health was at stake. "Doctor, the situation with the boy's father is complicated," she replied, choosing her words carefully. "We're not in contact." The doctor nodded understandingly. "I see, Jessica, but if there's any possibility of obtaining that information, it would be extremely valuable. Additionally, there are promising experimental therapies for which genetic compatibility with direct relatives could be crucial." For the rest of the appointment, Jessica maintained her composure, asking relevant questions and noting the doctor's recommendations. But inside, her mind was racing. The seed had been planted. After 7 years, perhaps it was time to face the past. On their way out of the clinic, keeping her promise, she took the boys to the ice cream shop at the mall. As the three enjoyed their treats, Jessica watched them with fresh eyes. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to think deeply about Michael Thompson. What had happened to him in those 7 years? Was he still married to the woman who had answered the phone? Did he have other children? Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. On the drive home, Jessica made a decision. Once the boys were asleep, she would do something she had avoided for 7 years, look up Michael Thompson. That night, after putting the triplets to bed and making sure they were asleep, Jessica sat in her home office with a glass of red wine. Her open laptop in front of her seemed almost menacing. For years, she had blocked any temptation to search for information about her ex-husband. It was as if Michael belonged to another life, one she had completely left behind. With a sigh, she typed his name into the search bar. Immediately, dozens of results appeared. Michael, after all, came from a prominent family in New York City's financial sector. She clicked the first link, a recent article from Business Magazine. "Hard Times for the Thompson Empire," the headline read. The article detailed how the family's long-standing financial firm had lost market position after a series of failed investments and scandals involving former partners. The photo showed Michael, now 38, thinner than she remembered, leaving the company headquarters after a tense shareholders' meeting. Jessica continued her research, discovering that after the near collapse of the family business, Michael had been demoted from CEO to operations manager, a public humiliation in the financial world. The company's website still listed him as an employee, but it was clear his power had been drastically reduced. A 2-year-old news item mentioned his divorce from Victoria Reynolds, to whom he had been married for only 3 years. There was no mention of children from this relationship. The irony of the situation wasn't lost on Jessica. While Michael faced professional and personal decline, she had built a business empire from scratch. The Horizon Group, which had started as a small consulting firm in Boston, was now a conglomerate with branches in 6 major American cities, employing over 500 people and generating annual revenue in the hundreds of millions. Continuing her research, Jessica discovered something that made her sit up straight in her chair, suddenly alert. The company where Michael currently worked, Thompson Finance and Investments, was in the process of being acquired. And the buyer was none other than the Star Fund, an investment arm of the Horizon Group itself. The acquisition had been initiated by her strategic expansion team, without Jessica being directly involved in the details. The proposal was in its final approval stage, awaiting only her signature as the group's CEO. "My God," she murmured, realizing the magnitude of the coincidence. In a matter of weeks, Michael Thompson, the man who had kicked her out of the house, falsely accusing her of betrayal, would technically be working for her. Life, with its peculiar sense of poetic justice, had come full circle. Jessica closed her laptop, finishing the rest of her wine in one sip. The discovery brought conflicting emotions. There was undeniable satisfaction in knowing the tables had turned so dramatically, but there was also a strange melancholy. No matter how successful she was now, no matter how fulfilling her life with her children might be, some wounds had never fully healed. And now, with Matthew's health at stake, those old wounds demanded attention. She needed to make a decision: approve the acquisition and indirectly become Michael's boss, or interfere with the process to avoid that connection? And more importantly, should she reach out to him for the family medical history, potentially crucial for Matthew's treatment? Jessica slept poorly that night, tormented by dreams where past and present blurred together. She woke up determined not to make rash decisions. First, she would carefully analyze the acquisition proposal for Thompson Finance and Investments on its own merits, without letting personal history influence her professional judgment. As for Matthew's medical concerns, she would decide after his follow-up appointment scheduled for next month. If Dr. James insisted on the importance of paternal family history, she would reconsider contacting Michael. The following week was particularly intense for Jessica. Besides her worries about Matthew's health, there was the Horizon Group's expansion to consider, with new contracts being negotiated in Seattle and Philadelphia. Work was a blessing in disguise, keeping her mind occupied and away from the far, personal issues troubling her. On Friday, she received an unexpected call from Sarah, her longtime friend now living in London, where she managed the Horizon Group's international branch. "Guess who I ran into at the Chamber of Commerce event yesterday?" Sarah asked, skipping even a hello. "No idea," Jessica replied, signing some documents as she spoke. "Jennifer Thompson, your ex's sister." Jessica paused, her pen hovering over the paper. What was she doing in London? "Apparently, the family's company is trying to attract European investors to save themselves from sinking," Sarah explained. "She didn't recognize me, of course, so I overheard some interesting conversations." "What kind of conversations?" Jessica couldn't help her curiosity. "Seems their financial situation is worse than anyone realizes. They're desperate for capital. And the cherry on top, the board is considering firing Michael, blaming him as part of the problem." Jessica absorbed the information in silence. The Thompson empire, which once seemed so solid and imposing, was crumbling. "By the way," Sarah continued, "I've been reading the Star Fund reports. Are you really considering buying their company?" "It's a purely strategic acquisition," Jessica replied, keeping her voice neutral. "The client portfolio is valuable, even if the current management is problematic." Sarah laughed on the other end of the line. "Say problematic current management. That's a polite way to refer to your ex-husband." "Sarah." Jessica tried to sound reprimanding, but a smile escaped her lips. "I'm just saying life takes funny turns, my friend. 7 years ago, you left his house with nothing but the clothes on your back, kicked out like a criminal. Now you could literally buy his company and fire him if you wanted." "It's not about revenge," Jessica replied, though a small part of her couldn't deny the satisfaction the idea brought. "Of course not," Sarah agreed, but her tone made it clear she thought otherwise. "How are my godchildren?" The conversation drifted to lighter topics, with Jessica sharing updates about the boys' latest school recital and Sarah telling stories about her recent romance with a British chef. Yet even after hanging up, thoughts of Michael lingered in Jessica's mind. Over the weekend, she decided to take the boys to the Galleria, the largest mall in Denver. Ethan and Gabriel wanted to visit the toy store to see the latest video game releases, while Matthew preferred the bookstore. Jessica, as always, tried to balance the three boys' different interests. "We can go to both places," she decided, as she parked the car in the mall's underground garage. "First the bookstore, then the toy store, and finally lunch. At the Italian restaurant you love." The boys agreed excitedly. It was rare to have their mother entirely available for a whole day, without work calls or emergency meetings. In the bookstore, Matthew lost himself among the children's and young adult shelves, while Ethan and Gabriel flipped through superhero magazines, unable to stay still for long. Jessica took the opportunity to browse some newly released business books, always mindful of her professional growth. It was in the checkout line that the unexpected happened. "Jessica? Jessica Parker." The slightly trembling female voice came from behind her. Jessica turned and found herself face to face with Barbara Thompson, her former mother-in-law. "Mrs. Johnson," she replied, maintaining her composure despite the surprise. The older woman, always elegant in her impeccable suits and understated jewelry, seemed to have aged considerably. There were more wrinkles on her face, and her hair, once dyed brown, now showed streaks of grey. It's been so long, Barbara said, visibly uncomfortable. I heard you are doing well. Yes, I can't complain, Jessica replied, diplomatically. Just then, Ethan and Gabriel approached, curious about who their mother was talking to. Barbara looked at them, and her face visibly paled. Are these your sons? She asked, her voice almost fading. Yes, Jessica confirmed. Ethan and Gabriel, and the one in the science section is Matthew. Barbara's eyes widened as she realized there were not two but three nearly identical boys. Three boys who were perfect copies of Michael as a child. My God, she murmured, a hand instinctively going to her chest. They're triplets. Yes, identical triplets, Jessica replied, carefully observing her former mother-in-law's reaction. And Barbara couldn't finish the sentence, but the implication was clear. Michael's sons? Yes, they are. They were 3 weeks old when I was thrown out of the mansion, falsely accused of betrayal. Jessica's calm, direct tone contrasted with the evident shock on Barbara's face. The idea that her son had kicked out his pregnant wife expecting triplets, unaware of her condition, seemed to deeply shake the older woman. Boys, called Jessica, realizing the conversation wasn't suitable for the children's ears. Why don't you go find Matthew? Tell him to pick 2 books. We can buy them all today. Ethan and Gabriel eagerly ran off toward their brother, leaving the 2 women momentarily alone. He doesn't know, does he? Asked Barbara, still visibly shaken. No, Jessica confirmed. I tried to tell him once. I called the house, but... A woman answered. I could hear Michael laughing in the background. That must have been Jennifer, Barbara said quickly. She stayed with him for a few weeks after you left. Michael had a nervous breakdown. He was hospitalized briefly. Jessica absorbed the information with surprise. She had never imagined Michael could have suffered so much from their separation, especially considering how he had treated her. We looked for you, Barbara continued. When Michael got out of the hospital, he was full of regret. He wanted to apologize, to explain that he had misunderstood everything. But you had disappeared. Disappeared? Jessica couldn't help a bitter laugh. I was thrown out with nothing but the clothes on my back. I had to start over from scratch in another city, pregnant with triplets, with no one to support me. Barbara lowered her eyes, clearly ashamed. We all believed Michael's version at first, that there was another man. And then, when he realized his mistake, why didn't anyone really come looking for me? Michael hired a detective, Barbara explained. He found you in Boston, but by the time Michael got there, you had already left. Jessica remembered how Sarah had warned her that Michael was in Boston just days after the triplets' premature birth. The frantic escape to Denver, the fear that he would find out about the babies and use his power and money to take custody from her. Well, none of that matters now, Jessica said, seeing the boys return with Matthew. It was a long time ago. Barbara looked at the 3 grandsons she had never known, tears forming in her eyes. They're beautiful, she murmured, just like Michael at that age. Mom, we found a dinosaur book Matthew wanted, Ethan said, holding it up like a trophy. Who are you? Asked Gabriel, always the most direct of the 3, eyeing Barbara curiously. Jessica hesitated, unsure how to explain the relationship. It was Barbara who answered, her voice thick with emotion. I'm just an old friend of your mother's. The boys accepted the explanation without question, eager to move on to the toy store. Jessica paid for the books and prepared to leave, but Barbara gently caught her arm. Jessica, please, the older woman pleaded. Michael deserves to know. They're his children too. He lost that right when he threw me out, Jessica replied, though not with the same conviction she might have had days earlier. Dr. James's words about the importance of family medical history echoed in her mind. Matthew's health was at stake. Would it be selfish to deny her son information that could be crucial for his treatment just to punish Michael? Take this, Barbara said, holding out a card. My number hasn't changed. If you change your mind, or if the boys, if they ever want to meet their father's side of the family, we're here. Jessica hesitated but finally took the card, slipping it into her purse before the boys noticed. Come on, kids, she called, heading toward the bookstore exit. The Toy store is waiting. Barbara stayed behind, watching the daughter-in-law she hadn't seen in 7 years walk away with the 3 grandsons she never knew existed. As soon as Jessica and the boys turned the corner, she pulled out her phone and dialed a familiar number. "Michael?" she said as soon as her son answered. "I need to see you. Today. It's important." For the rest of their time at the mall, Jessica tried to keep her composure, joining in her children's games and sharing their excitement over the toys and lunch. But her mind was miles away, replaying her encounter with Barbara and its implications. The revelation that Michael had suffered a nervous breakdown after she left completely contradicted the image she had held of him all these years. In her mind, he had simply moved on, quickly replacing her with Victoria. But if Barbara's version was true, if he had actually looked for her regretful, and even if all of that were true, would it change anything? He had humiliated her publicly, thrown her out of their home without a chance to defend herself. 7 years had passed. They had both moved on, taken completely different paths. "Mom, you're not eating," observed Matthew, always attentive to details. "Are you okay?" Jessica smiled, pushing away the troubling thoughts. "Everything's fine, sweetheart. I'm just distracted thinking about some work things." After lunch, she took the boys to the mall's arcade, where they could burn off some energy before heading home. As she watched Ethan and Gabriel competing in a racing simulator, with Matthew cheering beside them, her phone rang. It was Robert Anderson, her mentor and partner at Horizon Group. "Jessica, sorry to interrupt your weekend," he began, "but I just got out of a meeting with the representatives from Star Fund. They're eager to finalize the acquisition of Thompson Finance and Investments next week. We need your final signature on the agreement." "That fast?" Jessica was surprised. "I thought we were still in the due diligence phase." "It was completed yesterday. Everything checks out. It's a good deal, Jessica. The company is undervalued because of management issues, but the client portfolio is solid." Jessica took a deep breath, considering her options. "I'll review the documents carefully over the weekend, Robert. I'll give you a final answer on Monday." "Of course, no rush," he replied, though his tone suggested otherwise, "and enjoy your time with the boys." After hanging up, Jessica turned her attention back to her sons, a strange sense of fate washing over her. It was as if all the threads of her life were converging into a single point, forcing her to confront the past she had left behind. By late afternoon, as they prepared to leave the mall, Matthew suddenly slipped out of her grasp. "Look, Mom, a telescope store," he exclaimed, pointing to a small shop specializing in optical equipment. Before Jessica could respond, he had already run to the display window, fascinated by the astronomical instruments on show. "Matthew, wait!" she called, holding Ethan and Gabriel's hands as she tried to catch up. But the boy, usually the most cautious of the three, was completely absorbed by his discovery. He walked into the store without looking back, leaving his mother and brothers behind in the crowded mall. "Stay right here," Jessica instructed the other two, stopping near a bench. "Don't move for anything. I'll go get Matthew." The boys nodded obediently, used to following strict safety rules. Jessica hurried to the telescope store, but to her surprise and growing concern, Matthew wasn't there. "A blonde boy about 7 years old?" the clerk repeated when she asked. "No, Mom, I haven't seen any child come in here in the last few minutes." Jessica's heart raced. She looked around frantically, searching for a navy blue shirt and blonde hair in the crowd. Nothing. "Matthew," she called, her voice rising above the noise. "Matthew, where are you?" She quickly returned to the bench where she had left Ethan and Gabriel, who were looking at her with worried expressions. "Did you see where he went?" she asked, trying not to show the panic she was starting to feel. "I thought he went into the telescope store," Ethan replied, pointing to the shop. "Maybe he got lost," suggested Gabriel, always practical. "We can check the nearby stores." Jessica nodded, trying to stay calm. She took both boys by the hand and began searching the neighboring shops, asking employees and other customers if, they had seen a 7-year-old blonde boy alone. After 15 minutes of fruitless searching, she decided to alert mall security. Matthew's description was given, and a team of security officers began combing through the mall while announcements played over the loudspeaker. "Attention, shoppers. A 7-year-old blonde boy wearing a navy blue shirt and jeans answers, "To the name Matthew. If anyone spots him, please proceed to the nearest information desk." The minutes felt like hours for Jessica, who continued searching desperately, now with the help of 2 security guards, while Ethan and Gabriel waited at the mall's security office. Then her phone rang. "Mrs. Parker," said an unfamiliar male voice. "My name is Daniel. I'm a security officer at the Galleria parking lot. We found your son, Matthew." A wave of immense relief washed over Jessica. "Thank God. Is he okay? Where?" "Was he? He's fine, just a little scared. He went down to the parking lot looking for a telescope he saw in an ad. He was lost between the cars when a customer found him and brought him to us." "I'm on my way right now," Jessica said, already heading toward the elevators leading to the parking lot. "Can you tell me exactly where you are?" The security officer gave precise directions. They were in Section B near the exit to 5th Avenue. When Jessica arrived at the designated spot, she immediately spotted her son, sitting on a bench next to a security guard. But what made her stop abruptly was the sight of the man chatting animatedly with Matthew. A man she hadn't seen in 7 years but would recognize anywhere. Michael Thompson. The world seemed to move in slow motion as she processed the scene. Michael crouched in front of Matthew, showing something on his phone that made the boy smile. The security guard watched the interaction with a polite smile, neither of them realizing the incredible connection between the adult and the child who were talking like strangers. "Matthew," she finally called, her voice slightly breaking. Both turned at the same time. Matthew's face lit up when he saw his mother. Michael's remained politely neutral, without recognition. "Mom!" Matthew exclaimed, running to hug her. "This nice man found me when I was lost. He has a really cool astronomy app on his phone." Jessica hugged her son tightly, partly to hide her own shaken expression as she tried to regain her composure. "Thank you for looking after him," she finally said, looking at Michael. "Not a problem," he replied with a polite smile. "He seems like a very smart boy." He was fascinated by the constellations in the app. Michael clearly hadn't recognized her. 7 years, a meteoric career, and the tension of the moment had changed Jessica enough to make her unrecognizable to her ex-husband. Or maybe he simply hadn't expected to see her there, under those circumstances. "Mom, can I show Ethan and Gabriel the man's app?" Matthew asked, tugging at her sleeve. It was then that Jessica saw recognition begin to dawn on Michael's face. The mention of 2 other names, the possibility of other children resembling the one he had just met. "Ethan and Gabriel," he repeated, now looking more intently at Jessica. "My other sons," she explained, maintaining her composure with effort. "Identical triplets." Michael kept staring at her, understanding, slowly dawning in his eyes. "Jessica," he finally murmured, disbelief in his voice. The security guard, sensing the sudden tension, discreetly approached. "Is everything all right, Mom? Do you know this gentleman?" Jessica hesitated only a moment before answering, "Yes, he's an old acquaintance. Everything's fine, thank you for your help." The guard nodded but stayed nearby, clearly attentive to the situation. "We need to go," said Jessica, taking Matthew by the hand. "Your brothers are waiting at the security desk. They must be worried." "But Mom," protested Matthew, glancing regretfully at Michael's phone and its fascinating astronomy app. "Jessica, wait," pleaded Michael, his voice almost begging. "Please, can we talk?" She looked directly at him for the first time in 7 years. The arrogant, impulsive man who had thrown her out of their home had been replaced by someone who seemed older than his 38 years, with small worry lines around his eyes and a less confident posture. "Now isn't a good time," she replied firmly. "I have 3 children to take care of." Michael looked at Matthew, then back at Jessica, as if trying to piece together an impossible puzzle. "They're," he began, but she cut him off. "Yes, your sons. They were 3 weeks old when you threw me out, accusing me of betrayal." The impact of her words hit Michael like a physical blow. He staggered slightly, bracing himself against the nearest wall. "My God," he murmured, his face pale. "I didn't know. How could I have known?" "I tried to tell you," Jessica answered, keeping her voice low so Matthew wouldn't fully understand their discussion. "I called weeks later." "A woman answered. Jennifer, Michael said immediately. My sister, she came to stay with me because I wasn't doing well. Jessica remembered Barbara's words earlier that day. The matching story added credibility. Like I said, this isn't a good time for this conversation, she repeated firmly. I need to go. Jessica, please, Michael begged. His voice choked. They're my children. I have the right to know them. Rights? Jessica's tone hardened. You lost any rights when you treated me like a criminal, when you believed the worst about me without giving me a chance to defend myself. I was wrong, completely wrong, he admitted, running his hands through his hair in desperation. I realized it just days later, when the anger faded. I tried to find you. I hired detectives. 7 years later is a bit late for regrets. Michael, please, Jessica, at least think about it. They're my children too. Matthew watched the exchange with growing curiosity. Finally, he tugged his mother's hand. Mom, who is this man? Why is he saying we're his kids? Jessica looked at her son, then at Michael, and finally at the guard, who was still observing the scene with professional interest. We'll talk about this at home, sweetheart, she told the boy. Right now, we need to find your brothers. She turned to leave, but Michael stepped forward, holding out a business card. My number, he said, his voice trembling. Please, Jessica, when you're ready to talk. She hesitated, then took the card, tucking it into her purse without comment. Then, holding Matthew's hand tightly, she headed toward the elevators, feeling the weight of Michael's gaze on her back. At the security desk, Ethan and Gabriel greeted their brother with a mix of relief and the typical sibling scolding. You disappeared, accused Ethan. Mom was so worried. Sorry, murmured Matthew, seeming genuinely remorseful. I saw a telescope ad and went looking for the store. Jessica thanked the security guards for their help and led the three boys to the parking lot, careful to use a different exit than the one leading to the area where she had found Michael. On the way home, Ethan and Gabriel excitedly told their brother about the adventure of searching for him, while Matthew, in turn, talked about the nice guy who had helped him when he was lost. He had an app that showed all the constellations, Mom. It was like having a planetarium on your phone. Jessica responded with monosyllables, her mind still processing the unexpected encounter. The rational part of her brain said she shouldn't be shaken, that nothing had changed. But another part, one she tried to ignore, wondered if she had made a mistake keeping the children away from their father for so long. When they got home, Jessica made dinner while the boys took baths and got ready for bed. The familiar routine helped calm her nerves, bringing a semblance of normalcy to the end of a turbulent day. But when the three finally fell asleep, Jessica sat on her porch with a glass of wine, gazing at the starry Denver sky. 2 business cards lay on the table in front of her, Barbara's and Michael's, 2 connections to a past she thought she had completely left behind. Her phone rang, interrupting her thoughts. It was Robert. Sorry to call so late, Jessica, he said, sounding concerned. But I just got some important news about the acquisition of Thompson Finance and Investments. What happened? She asked, suddenly alert. One of the directors, Michael. Thompson is trying to block the sale, claiming the price is below the company's real value. Jessica nearly choked on her wine. Michael, who hours earlier seemed to have no idea who she was now trying to stop his company from being acquired by the Horizon Group. That doesn't make sense, she murmured, more to herself than to Robert. He doesn't have the power for that. He's just a manager now. Apparently, he still holds enough shares to cause trouble, Robert explained. He won't be able to stop it completely, but he can significantly delay the process. Jessica thought for a moment. Leave it to me, Robert. I think I can handle this. After hanging up, she looked again at the cards on the table. Maybe the mall encounter hadn't been as accidental as it seemed. Maybe Michael had known who she was all along. The next morning, while the boys were still asleep, Jessica made a decision. She picked up the phone and dialed the number on Michael's card. We need to talk, she said as soon as he answered, without preamble. Tonight, 8 o'clock, text me your address. Jessica? His voice sounded surprised, as if he hadn't expected her to actually call. Yes, of course, thank you for calling. Don't get the wrong idea, Michael, she cut in coldly. This conversation is about business, not our past. Understood, he replied, though his tone suggested otherwise. "I'll wait." "For your text with the address." The rest of Sunday passed normally, with Jessica taking the boys to the park in the morning and helping them with homework in the afternoon. She hired Mrs. Johnson, their trusted babysitter, to stay with them that night, explaining she had an emergency work meeting. At 8 sharp, she parked her BMW convertible in front of the address Michael had sent, an apartment in a middle-class building in Greenview, a far cry from the mansion they had lived in together in New York City. Michael answered the door immediately, as if he'd been eagerly awaiting her arrival. He was wearing jeans and a simple dress shirt, a far cry from the expensive suits he used to wear when Jessica first met him. "Thank you for coming," he said, leading her into the modestly decorated living room. "Would you like something to drink?" "No, thank you. Let's get straight to the point." Jessica sat on the sofa, maintaining a professional demeanor. She placed her briefcase on the coffee table and pulled out some documents. "I heard you're trying to block the acquisition of Thompson Finance and Investments by the Star Fund," she began, without preamble. "Why?" Michael seemed genuinely surprised. "Star Fund," he repeated. "What does that have to do with—" Then understanding dawned on his face. "The Star Fund belongs to your corporate group," he concluded, almost to himself. "You're buying my family's company." Jessica nodded, watching him closely. "It's purely a strategic move. The client portfolio is valuable, even if the current management has shortcomings." A faint flush spread across Michael's face, but he kept his composure. "I'm not trying to block the sale," he explained. "I'm just questioning the valuation. The offer is significantly below what the company is worth, even considering recent issues." "Recent issues?" Jessica couldn't help but feel a certain satisfaction at seeing him uncomfortable. "Are you referring to the disastrous decisions that nearly bankrupted the company, the reckless investments, the scandals involving questionable partners?" "I wasn't the only one making those decisions." Michael defended himself, his voice tense. "The board approved every one of them. And then they shifted all the blame onto you, demoting you from CEO to manager," Jessica finished. "Ironic, isn't it? Being unfairly accused and punished without a chance to defend yourself." The blow hit its mark. Michael looked away, visibly affected by the comparison. "I deserve this," he admitted finally. "What I did to you was unforgivable." The frank and vulnerable admission took Jessica by surprise. She had expected denial, excuses, maybe even counter-accusations, not this absolute acceptance of guilt. "I didn't come here to discuss our past," she said, regaining her composure. "I came to talk about the acquisition. And I need to talk about our children," Michael replied, raising his eyes to meet hers. "Children I didn't even know existed until yesterday." Jessica hesitated. It was true that the main reason for accepting this meeting had been professional, but deep down she knew the question of the boys would inevitably come up. "What do you want to know?" she asked finally. "Everything," he answered, simply. "Their full names, their personalities, their likes, their stories. 7 years of life I missed." There was so much genuine pain in his voice that Jessica felt her wall of professional indifference begin to crack. "Ethan, Matthew, and Gabriel," she began hesitantly. "They were born prematurely at 32 weeks. They spent almost a month in the NICU." As she spoke, she saw tears forming in Michael's eyes. Every detail she shared, their first tooth, their first word, their first step, was both a gift to him and a painful reminder of what he had lost. "Do they know about me?" he finally asked. "They know they have a father who lives far away," Jessica replied. "I don't go into details. They're still too young to understand the complexity of the situation." "Would they—" Michael hesitated, his voice choked. "Would they hate me if they knew the truth?" The question, so vulnerable and direct, touched something in Jessica that she thought she had buried long ago. "Children don't hold grudges like adults, Michael. They have an incredible capacity to forgive and love unconditionally." He nodded, wiping away a tear that had escaped. "I'd like to meet them officially, not as a stranger who helped one of them when he was lost, but as their father." Jessica took a deep breath, considering all the implications. The family she had carefully built over 7 years would change forever if she allowed Michael into the boys' lives. But once again, Matthew's face during the doctor's appointment came to her mind. His health was at stake. "There's something you need to know," she finally said. "Matthew, the boy you met yesterday, has a congenital heart condition." Concern immediately flashed across Michael's face. "What kind of condition? Is it serious?" "It's a septal defect, combined with mitral valve insufficiency," Jessica explained. "So far it's been managed with medication, but the doctor mentioned the possibility of surgery in the future." "My God," Michael murmured, visibly shaken. "Is there anything I can do?" "Actually, yes," Jessica replied, finally reaching the point that had been the catalyst for this entire reunion. The doctor suggested mapping the medical history of the paternal side. Heart conditions often have a genetic component. "So of course I'll do any tests needed," Michael said without hesitation. "My father had a mild heart issue. It was treated with medication, and my paternal grandfather died of a heart attack relatively young." Jessica nodded, absorbing the information. The family history confirmed the possibility of a genetic predisposition. "I'll pass this on to Matthew's doctor, and if more tests are needed, I'll be available anytime," Michael finished. "Day or night." The English phrase, one he used to say when they were married, brought an unexpected wave of nostalgia. For a moment, Jessica caught a glimpse of the man she had fallen in love with so many years ago, before arrogance and insecurity turned him into the tyrant who had driven her from their home. A heavy silence fell over the room, both lost in memories and thoughts. It was Michael who finally broke it. "Going back to the acquisition," he said, returning to a professional tone, "I'm willing to withdraw my objections on one condition." Jessica raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "What condition would that be?" "That you let me be part of my children's lives. I'm not asking for shared custody or any formal legal arrangement. Just the chance to know them, to build a relationship with them." Jessica studied her ex-husband's face for a long moment. There was desperation there, but also something more: determination. The same determination that had built him a financial empire by 25, the same that now drove him to fight for the right to know his sons. "I need to think about it," she finally replied. "This isn't a decision I can make impulsively." "I understand," Michael nodded. "But know this, regardless of your decision about the boys, I won't block the acquisition anymore. That was childish and impulsive on my part." Jessica gathered her documents and stood to leave. "Thank you for your honesty," she said, keeping her tone professional. "I'll be in touch once I've made a decision." At the door, Michael gently held her arm. "Jessica, I know I don't deserve anything from you after what I did, but please, think of the boys. Every child deserves to know their father, even if that father made terrible mistakes." She gave a brief nod and left, her heart heavy with the weight of the decision she had to make. In the car, she finally allowed herself to release the emotions. She had held back the entire meeting. Silent tears streamed down her face as she drove through the familiar streets of Denver. At home, she found Mrs. Johnson dozing in the living room, the television on low volume. After thanking and paying the babysitter, she checked on the boys in their rooms. All three were fast asleep, oblivious to the emotional storm their mother was weathering. In Matthew's room, Jessica lingered a little longer. She gazed at her son's peaceful face, so much like Michael's. The small hand holding the blanket had the same palm lines as the father, the same nail shape. It was like looking at a miniature version of the man she had once loved. In the following days, Jessica focused on the final negotiations for the acquisition of Thompson Finance and Investments. With Michael having withdrawn his objections, the process moved forward quickly. By Friday, the final documents were signed. The Horizon Group had officially acquired the company, where Michael now worked as a manager. "What about the staff?" asked Robert during the final meeting. "Will we keep the current team?" Jessica hesitated for just a second before answering, "Yes, for now. We'll conduct a full performance review in 3 months to decide who stays." In truth, she had already decided that Michael would keep his job regardless of the review's outcome, not out of consideration for the past they shared, but for the future of the children they had together. On Saturday evening, While the boys watched a movie in the living room, Jessica received a call from Sarah. "So?" her friend asked without preamble. "I heard the acquisition is complete. Your ex-husband technically works for you now." "Things are a little more complicated than that, sir," Jessica replied, stepping onto the balcony so the boys wouldn't hear. "How so?" "Michael found out about the boys." The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. "How?" Sarah finally asked, clearly shocked. Jessica recounted the events of the past few days, running into Barbara at the mall, Matthew getting lost and being helped by Michael, the subsequent conversation in her apartment. "My God, Jessica," Sarah murmured when she finished. "This sounds like a soap opera. What are you going to do?" "I don't know yet," Jessica admitted. "Part of me wants to keep things as they are. We've built a good life. The boys are happy. Why complicate it?" But Matthew needs his paternal family's medical history, and to be honest, I always knew this day would come eventually. The boys have a right to know their father." "What about you?" Sarah asked, as perceptive as ever. "How do you feel about seeing Michael again after all this time?" Jessica hesitated before answering. "Confused," she finally admitted. "I spent 7 years painting him as a selfish, cruel monster. It's unsettling to see him so broken, so different from the arrogant man I knew." "People change," Sarah observed. "You certainly have." "Yes, but for the better. Stronger, more independent." "Maybe he's changed for the better too. More humble, more mature." The conversation gave Jessica a lot to think about. After hanging up, she returned to her sons, who were now enthusiastically debating which cartoon to watch next. "Kids," she called, sitting on the couch between them, "there's something important I need to talk to you about." All three looked at her with curiosity. Jessica took a deep breath before continuing. "You remember how you always ask about your father, and I always say he lives far away?" They nodded in unison. "Well, it turns out he doesn't live that far after all. In fact, he's here in Denver now." The boy's eyes widened in perfect sync. "Did he come looking for us?" Ethan, the most direct, asked. "Not exactly," Jessica answered, choosing her words carefully. "We ran into each other by chance. And he was very happy to find out about you." "Did he know we existed?" Gabriel, always the most curious about details, asked. Jessica hesitated. How could she explain the complexity of the situation to 7-year-olds? "No, he didn't know," she answered honestly. "Your father and I separated before I found out I was pregnant with you, and now he wants to meet us?" Matthew's quiet voice surprised everyone. "Yes, he really wants to meet you," confirmed Jessica, carefully observing her children's reactions. "When?" the three asked almost in unison, their faces lit with an enthusiasm she hadn't anticipated. "If you'd like, we could arrange it for tomorrow," she suggested, her heart racing at the magnitude of the change she was allowing into their lives. "Yes," they all exclaimed, bouncing on the couch with excitement. Jessica smiled despite her anxiety. The genuine joy on her children's faces confirmed that, no matter what complications might arise, she was making the right decision. Later, that night after putting the boys to bed, she picked up her phone and sent a message to Michael. "The boys would like to meet you, tomorrow 10 a.m. at Central Park, if you're still interested." The reply came almost instantly. "I'll be there. From the bottom of my heart, thank you for this opportunity." Jessica stared at the message for a long moment before setting the phone aside. Tomorrow, the life she had carefully built over 7 years would change forever. The family she had formed with her 3 sons would gain a new member, the father they had never known. As she prepared for bed, she reflected on life's unexpected turns. 7 years ago, she had been cast out of the mansion in New York City, alone and desperate, unaware she was pregnant with triplets. Now she was a successful executive, owner of a business conglomerate, about to reintroduce her ex-husband into her children's lives. Fate, Jessica thought as she turned off the lights, had a peculiar sense of humor, and tomorrow would mark the first day of a new chapter in her family's complicated story. She fell asleep with that thought as a light autumn rain began to fall over Denver, as if washing away the past and paving the way for a fresh start. Sunday morning dawned with a surprisingly blue sky over Denver, as if the universe were conspiring to make this special day even more memorable. Jessica woke up early, even before her alarm, the anticipation of what lay ahead making it impossible to sleep any longer. She prepared the boys' breakfast with extra care, making star-shaped pancakes, their favorite for special occasions. When the three finally came downstairs, dressed neatly in beige pants and white shirts, their faces showed a mix of excitement and nervousness that perfectly mirrored her own feelings. "Mum, what's Dad like?" asked Gabriel, always the most curious of the three. Jessica hesitated, unsure how to describe Michael to her sons. "He's a lot like you," she finally answered, smiling. "In fact, you're practically identical to how he looked as a child. The same blonde hair, same blue eyes, same smile." "Is he nice?" Lucas wanted to know. "Yes," Jessica replied, surprised by the sincerity in her own voice. Despite everything that had happened between them, she could never say Michael wasn't a good person at heart. Impulsive, sometimes arrogant, but not unkind. "He's smart, loves astronomy like Matthew, and—" "How does he know I like astronomy?" Matthew interrupted, frowning in confusion. Jessica realized her slip. "Remember that man who helped you when you got lost at the mall?" she asked, watching her son's reaction closely. Matthew's eyes widened in understanding. "That was him? Dad was the guy with the star app?" Jessica nodded, and the three boys erupted in simultaneous questions, reacting to the revelation with a mix of shock and excitement. She briefly explained how they had met by chance, leaving out the more complicated details of the situation. By 9:30, the family was in Jessica's BMW convertible. The triplets were in the back seat, unusually quiet, each lost in their own thoughts about the father they were about to officially meet. Central Park was relatively calm that Sunday morning. Jessica parked near the playground, the spot they had agreed on for the meeting. Michael hadn't arrived yet, giving her a few minutes to calm her nerves as she watched the boys run toward the swings. "Everything will be fine," she murmured to herself, unconsciously checking her watch for the third time in 5 minutes. Exactly at 10 o'clock, she spotted Michael walking toward them. He wore jeans and a light blue polo shirt, carrying a package wrapped in colorful paper. He looked just as nervous as she was, running his free hand through his hair repeatedly, a gesture she remembered well from their married days. "Good morning," he greeted, stopping a few steps away, as if unsure of the appropriate distance. "Good morning," Jessica replied, forcing a polite smile. "The boys are on the swings. They're excited to meet you." Michael nodded, looking in the direction she indicated. His eyes lit up as he watched the three identical boys playing, unaware of his presence. For a moment, he seemed completely speechless. "They're amazing," he finally managed to say, his voice thick with emotion. "Thank you for allowing this, Jessica. I know it isn't easy for you." She simply nodded, feeling her own throat tighten unexpectedly. Seeing Michael's genuine emotion was affecting her more than she cared to admit. "Shall we?" she invited, starting to walk toward the swings. When they spotted their mother approaching with a stranger, the triplets immediately stopped playing. 3 pairs of identical blue eyes fixed on Michael intently, studying every detail of his appearance. "Boys," Jessica called when they were close enough. "This is Michael, your father." A heavy silence filled with expectation followed her words. Surprisingly, it was Matthew who broke it. "You're the guy from the Star app," he said with a small smile of recognition. Michael smiled back, visibly relieved the ice had been broken. "Yes, that's me. You really like astronomy, don't you, Matthew?" The boy's eyes sparkled upon hearing his name. "How do you know I'm Matthew?" he asked, genuinely surprised. "Most people can't tell us apart." Michael's smile widened. "Your mum told me you're the one who loves astronomy. Plus," he added, leaning in as if sharing a secret, "you have a tiny birthmark behind your left ear. I had the same one when I was little." Matthew instantly touched his ear, feeling the small mark that very few people noticed. The gesture created an instant connection between them. Gabriel, never one to stay in the background, stepped forward. "I'm Gabriel," he announced, extending his hand formally, as he'd learned in school. The coolest of the three. Michael laughed, shaking his hand with equal formality. "Nice to meet you, Gabriel. I've heard you make friends very easily." It was Ethan's turn to introduce himself, studying his father with analytical eyes that reminded Jessica too much of her own. "I'm Ethan," he said simply. "Why did you never come visit us before?" The direct question caught everyone off guard. Michael quickly glanced at Jessica, unsure how to respond. She gave a small nod, leaving the decision to him. "It's a complicated story, Ethan," Michael answered honestly, crouching to their eye level. "Your mom and we separated before I knew you existed. And then, well, things got messy. But I'm here now, if you'll let me be part of your lives." Ethan considered the answer for a moment, with a seriousness impressive for a 7-year-old. "Are you staying this time?" he finally asked. "I am," promised Michael, his voice steady, despite the emotion. "I'm not going anywhere." Satisfied with the answer, Ethan finally smiled, the last barrier of reserve crumbling. "I brought something for you," said Michael, extending the package he was carrying. "It's a gift to share." The three boys crowded around the package, tearing the paper with the enthusiasm typical of their age. Inside, they found a portable telescope of surprisingly good quality for its size. "Wow!" exclaimed Matthew, clearly the most impressed of the three. "A real telescope." "It's not as powerful as the bigger ones," explained Michael, pleased with their reaction. "But it's perfect for beginners, and you can take it anywhere. I thought we could use it together someday to look at the stars." "Can we use it today?" asked Gabriel, already holding the instrument with reverence. "You can't see stars during the day, silly," corrected Ethan, with the superiority of someone who had just learned that fact. "But we can see the moon," Michael interjected. "It's visible even during the day if we know where to look." The next few minutes were spent with Michael teaching the boys how to set up and aim the telescope. Jessica watched from a nearby bench, conflicting emotions battling inside her. There was something surreal about seeing her children interacting so naturally with the father they had never known, as if some deep genetic connection drew them together instinctively. The morning passed quickly, with the four of them exploring the park, discovering shared interests and laying the first foundations of a father-son relationship. Jessica kept a slight distance, allowing them to build this connection without her constant interference, but always nearby, watching closely. By midday, Matthew began showing signs of tiredness. His physical stamina was naturally lower than his brother's due to his heart condition, and the morning's excitement had drained his energy. "I think it's time we go," said Jessica, approaching the group. "Matthew needs to rest before lunch." Michael immediately noticed the boy's paleness. Of course," he agreed, displaying a sensitivity that surprised Jessica. "We can continue another day if you'd like." "We do," the three chorused, including Matthew, despite his obvious fatigue. "How about dinner at our place on Wednesday?" Jessica suggested, surprising even herself with the spontaneous invitation. "After work, say 7? Michael's face lit up at the unexpected offer. "I'd love that. Should I bring anything?" "Just you is enough," she replied, keeping her tone light. "The boys can show you around the house and we can talk more comfortably." They said goodbye with promises for Wednesday. On the way home, the car buzzed with the triplets' excited chatter, each eager to share their impressions of their newly discovered father. "He seems nice," declared Gabriel, always the first to form opinions about people. "And he knows a lot." "About stars," added Matthew, clearly impressed by this particular aspect. Ethan stayed quiet a little longer before speaking. "Why did you and Dad split up, Mom?" The question Jessica had been dreading had finally come. She took a deep breath, searching for the right balance between honesty and age-appropriate explanation. "We had different views on a lot of things," she answered carefully. "Sometimes, even when two people care for each other, they realize they can't stay together in a healthy way." "Did you fight?" Ethan pressed. "Sometimes," she admitted. "Your father had a strong temper back then, and I was also very young and inexperienced." "But he changed, didn't he?" asked Gabriel. "He seems nice now." "Yes," agreed Jessica, surprising herself again with her honesty. "He seems to have changed a lot." The rest of Sunday passed quietly, with the boys still processing the significant change in their lives. Jessica also had much to process. The Michael she had met today was so different from the man who had thrown her out of their home 7 years ago that he seemed almost like a completely different person. On Wednesday, Jessica left the office early to prepare dinner herself, something she rarely had time to do on weekdays. She chose lasagna, a dish she knew both the boys and Michael enjoyed. The triplets came home from school particularly excited, eager to show their father their rooms, toys, and collections. Mrs. Johnson, the nanny who looked after them daily, watched the unusual commotion with curiosity. "Is there a special occasion today?" the woman asked Jessica as she helped set the dining room table. "The boy's father is coming for dinner," Jessica replied, checking the lasagna in the oven. "They officially met him on Sunday." Mrs. Johnson's eyes widened in surprise. In 5 years working for the family, she had never heard the triplets' father mentioned beyond vague references. "That's unexpected," the nanny commented diplomatically. Jessica smiled, understanding the curiosity of her trusted employee. "It's a long story, Mary, but in short, it was an accidental reunion that turned out to be good for the boys, especially considering Matthew's condition." Mrs. Johnson nodded knowingly. Having been a second mother to the triplets for so many years, she shared Jessica's concerns about Matthew's health. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. It really helps those of us just starting out. Now continuing. At exactly 7 o'clock, the doorbell rang. The 3 boys rushed to the door, nearly bumping into each other in their eagerness to be the first to open it. Jessica let them greet their father, watching from the living room entrance as Michael was practically dragged inside by his excited children. "Hi," she greeted when they finally made it to the living room. "Welcome." "Thanks for the invitation," Michael replied, handing her a vase of white orchids. "I know you said not to bring anything, but they're beautiful," Jessica interrupted, accepting the flowers. "Thank you." White orchids had always been her favorite, a detail he evidently hadn't forgotten after all these years. "Come on, Dad," Gabriel called, pulling him by the hand. "We want to show you our rooms and my constellation," so added Matthew. "And my toy car collection," Ethan finished. Jessica laughed at her son's excitement. "You have half an hour for the tour before dinner," she warned, as Michael was led upstairs by his 3 little guides. She returned to the kitchen. To finish the preparations, a strange sense of déjà vu washing over her. How many times in their few years of marriage had she prepared dinners to welcome Michael home after a day at work? The familiarity of it, even after so long, was unsettling. 40 minutes later, the family was gathered around the dining table. The boys all talked at once, eager to share with their mother everything they had shown their father. Michael seemed genuinely interested in every detail of his sons' lives, asking questions and making comments that showed real attention. "Matthew showed me the astronomy software you bought him," Michael remarked when the boys were distracted. "With dessert. It's really impressive. His understanding of the night sky is very advanced for his age." "He's always been fascinated by stars," Jessica replied, "ever since he was little. It was as if he had been born knowing the names of the constellations." They both smiled, sharing the joy of proud parents. "How are things at the company?" she asked, shifting to more neutral ground. "Is the transition going smoothly?" Thompson, finance and investments had officially become part of the Horizon Group on Monday, with Michael retaining his position as manager, now indirectly reporting to Jessica. "Smoother than I expected," he admitted. "Your team is very professional. No one treats me like the boss's ex-husband, which I honestly feared." Jessica smiled. "That was my directive. Personal and professional matters don't mix at Horizon Group." "A lesson I learned the hard way over the years," Michael agreed with a tone of self-reflection. "Mixing the personal and professional was one of my many mistakes." The comment hung in the air for a moment, carrying implications that went far beyond the immediate context of the conversation. Jessica chose not to explore them, at least not now with the boys nearby. After dinner, while the triplets showed Michael their video games in the living room, Jessica prepared coffee in the kitchen. She was surprised by his quiet arrival. "Can I help with anything?" he offered. "Everything's under control," she replied, gesturing to the tray with prepared cups. "Did the boys let you escape?" "They're deep into a heated racing game," Michael explained, smiling. "I thought it might be a good time for us to talk, if—" "That's all right." Jessica nodded, carrying the tray to the small balcony adjacent to the kitchen, an intimate space overlooking the backyard garden. They sat on the wicker chairs, the aroma of freshly brewed coffee mingling with the scent of the roses Jessica carefully tended. "Your home is beautiful," Michael remarked, observing the garden illuminated by strategically placed lights. "Cozy and elegant at the same time, it suits you." "Thank you," she replied, accepting the compliment without elaboration. A momentary silence settled between them, filled only by the distant sounds of the boys playing in the living room and the soft rustle of leaves in the wind. "Jessica, Michael began, visibly hesitating. "I wanted to thank you properly, not just for today, but for everything. For raising 3 incredible boys on your own. For letting me be part of their lives now, after everything that happened." She watched the steam rise from her cup, searching for the right words. "I did what I thought was best for them," she finally replied. "And now, I believe knowing their father is what's best for them." "Even so. I know you could have chosen a different path, especially considering how we separated." Jessica looked up to meet his gaze directly. "Why did you do it, Michael? After 3 years together, how could you so easily believe I was cheating on you?" The question had lingered between them for 7 years, never spoken until now. Michael set his cup on the table, as if needing both hands to gather his thoughts. "There's no valid excuse," he began, his voice quiet but firm. "Nothing I say will make what I did acceptable, but you deserve an explanation, even if it's late." He paused, taking a deep breath before continuing. "I've always had trust issues. I grew up watching my father cheat on my mother repeatedly, seeing her forgive him every time, pretending nothing happened to keep up appearances. I swore I'd never be like him, but also that I'd never be like her, never the betrayed one, who accepts it and moves on." Jessica listened intently, seeing Michael in a new light. During their marriage, he had rarely spoken about his family with such honesty. "When I found the messages on your phone, mentioning secret meetings, surprises I wasn't supposed to find out about, and saw the photos of you in places I didn't recognize, something inside me just broke. It wasn't you I was seeing, it was my mother being deceived all over again. It wasn't your explanations I was refusing to hear, it was the pathetic excuses from my father that I'd heard so many times as a child." The realization hit Jessica like a wave. The messages were about the surprise birthday party she was planning for him. The photos were of her at the jewelry store, picking out the watch she'd bought as a gift. "The worst part is, a few days later, when the initial anger faded, I started noticing the inconsistencies in my own theory." Michael continued, "You'd never given me any real reason to doubt you. I went back to check the messages I'd seen to try to understand better, but you were already gone and had taken the phone with you." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of frustration Jessica knew well. "That's when I realized my terrible mistake. I tried to find you, hired detectives. When they finally tracked you down in Boston, I went there, but you'd already left again. I left contacts at your last known address, but never got a response. I was already in Denver by then," Jessica explained. "With the boys just born, premature, still in the NICU." Michael closed his eyes for a moment, the pain of what he'd lost clearly visible on his face. 7 years, he murmured. "I missed 7 years of my children's lives because of a moment of insanity, of pathological insecurity." Jessica felt an unexpected wave of compassion rise within her. The man before her was no longer the arrogant tyrant who'd thrown her out of their home, but someone broken by the weight of his own mistake, carrying the guilt for years. "We can't change the past," she finally said. "But we can decide what the future looks like." Michael looked up, cautious hope in his eyes. "What exactly does that mean?" "It means you're their father. You always will be. And if you're genuinely committed to being a consistent, positive part of their lives, then we'll find a way to make that work." The relief on his face was palpable. "I'm fully committed," he said, with an intensity Jessica hadn't seen in years. I'll do whatever it takes to be a good father to them. They seem to really like you, she observed, a small smile forming on her lips. Especially Matthew. I've never seen him open up to a stranger so quickly. He's special, Michael agreed. They all are, but there's something about Matthew, a sensitivity, a depth in his gaze. He's the most like you in personality, Jessica said, surprising them both with the remark. Ethan has more of my analytical temperament. Gabriel inherited my mother's charisma. But Matthew, he has your introspection, your way of marveling at the universe. Michael seemed genuinely moved by the comparison. And what about his health? He asked, concern evident in his voice. You mentioned the heart condition. Jessica explained Matthew's diagnosis in detail, the current treatments and potential future needs, including the possible surgery Dr. James had mentioned. I'll take any test needed, Michael promised. And if they need a compatible donor for anything, you can count on me unconditionally. Thank you. That means a lot. An excited shout from the living room interrupted their conversation. Apparently one of the triplets had won the game, much to the dismay of the other two. We'd better get back before the competition gets too intense, Jessica suggested, standing up. The rest of the evening passed in surprising harmony. After another round of games, it was time to put the boys to bed. To Jessica's surprise, the three children asked Michael to join their nightly ritual by reading them a bedtime story. Watching from the doorway of the shared bedroom, Jessica felt a strange mix of emotions as she saw Michael sitting on the edge of the bed, enthusiastically reading an adventure story, using different voices for each character, just as she imagined. A father should. When all three finally fell asleep, Michael quietly left the room and found Jessica in the hallway. Do you do this every night? He asked, impressed. Whenever I'm not traveling for work, she confirmed. It's our tradition. You're an amazing mother, Jessica, Michael said, genuine admiration in his voice. They're wonderful children, polite, smart, loving, and that's thanks to you. Thank you, she replied without false modesty. She knew she had done a good job raising the boys, even under difficult circumstances. They walked down the stairs, in thoughtful silence, both processing the night's meaningful events. At the front door, Michael hesitated before leaving. Can I see them again soon? Of course, Jessica answered without hesitation. How about this weekend? We could have a picnic in the park if the weather's nice. That would be perfect, he agreed, smiling. Thank you so much, Jessica, for everything. She nodded, watching. Him walked to his car parked in the driveway. A part of her, the part that had nurtured anger and resentment for 7 years, felt lighter now, as if some weight had been lifted from her shoulders. The next morning, Jessica woke to a text from Michael, a simple photo of the four of them from the night before, taken by Mrs. Johnson without Jessica noticing. In the picture, Michael was reading to the three boys, all wearing identical expressions of enchantment, the resemblance between father and sons striking under the soft glow of the lamp. Best night of my life. Thank you again, the caption read. Jessica smiled at her phone screen, feeling something unexpected, happiness for Michael's joy. It was a new sensation, catching her off guard with its intensity. In the weeks that followed, Michael became a regular presence in the triplets' lives. Wednesday dinners became a tradition, as did Saturday outings. He made sure to attend school, meetings, swimming lessons, and especially Matthew's doctor's appointments, showing genuine commitment to every aspect of his children's lives. Matthew's condition, though stable with medication, remained a concern. During one particularly important appointment, Dr. James presented the results of the genetic tests he had ordered for Michael and the other triplets. The good news, the doctor began, looking at his screen, is that we have excellent compatibility between the siblings and good compatibility with the father. This is crucial if we ever need to consider any procedures involving cell or tissue transplants in the future. Jessica and Michael exchanged relieved glances. They sat side by side in the doctor's office, presenting a united front for their children, something neither would have imagined possible just months earlier. What about surgery? Jessica asked, returning to the topic that worried her most. Do you still think it'll be necessary? Dr. James adjusted his glasses, carefully considering his response. With these results and his positive response to medication, I believe we can postpone any surgical intervention for now. We'll continue close monitoring, but Matthew is responding well to conservative treatment. Both parents exhaled in relief. Even with the good news, the tension of the situation created a silent bond between them. As they left the clinic, Michael lightly touched Jessica's arm. "Want to grab some coffee?" he asked. "Just the two of us, without the boys. I think we need to talk." She hesitated only for a moment before agreeing. At a coffee shop near the clinic, they sat at a discreet table in the corner. Jessica ordered a cappuccino, Michael an espresso, just like they used to do years ago when they went out together. "I never imagined we'd be here in this situation," he remarked after their orders arrived. "Co-parenting after 7 years apart. Life has a strange sense of humor," Jessica agreed, absently stirring her cappuccino. "Jessica," Michael began, his tone suddenly more serious. "I know we're building something new here, a parenting dynamic we never had before, but there's something I need to tell you, something I've been feeling these past few weeks." She looked at him with a mix of curiosity and apprehension. "I still have feelings for you," Michael confessed, the words tumbling out quickly, as if he feared losing his courage if he hesitated. "I'm not saying this to complicate things or create unrealistic expectations. I just thought I should be honest." Jessica was momentarily speechless. Of all the directions she expected this conversation to take, this wasn't one of them. "Michael, You don't have to say anything," he interrupted gently. "I know I caused irreparable damage. I know you built a whole life without me. I'm not asking for anything, just being honest about where I am emotionally." She studied, his face searching for signs of the arrogant, impulsive man she once knew. Instead, she found only honest vulnerability and a maturity that hadn't existed 7 years ago. "I don't know what to say," she admitted finally. "I spent so long building a wall against you, against what you represented in my life. I never considered the possibility of feeling something other than resentment toward me," he finished with a small, sad smile. "Something like that," she agreed. "I'm confused, to be honest. There are moments when I see the man I fell in love with, especially when you're with the boys, and there are moments when I still feel the ghost of the pain you caused." Michael nodded in understanding. "That makes sense, and I'm not asking for an answer now. I just wanted you to know where I stand." "Thank you for your honesty," Jessica replied. "I think I need time too to figure out where I am emotionally." They finished their coffee in contemplative silence, each absorbed in their own complex thoughts. As they said goodbye in the parking lot, there was a moment of hesitation, as if neither knew exactly what the proper protocol was for the unique situation they found themselves in. "See you on Wednesday?" Michael finally asked, referring to their traditional weekly dinner. "See you on Wednesday," Jessica confirmed with a small smile. In the weeks that followed, something subtle shifted in their dynamic. There was a new level of awareness in their interactions, small moments of eye contact that lasted a beat too long, shared smiles when one of the boys said something particularly insightful. The triplets, with their sharp, childlike perception, noticed the change. "Are you two going to start dating again?" Gabriel asked bluntly one night after Michael had left following their usual Wednesday dinner. Jessica nearly choked on her tea. "Why do you ask that?" she managed, after regaining her composure. "You keep looking at each other like that," the boy explained, as if it were obvious. "Just like Aunt Sarah looks at her boyfriend during video calls." Ethan and Matthew nodded in agreement, clearly having discussed it among themselves earlier. "The situation between your father and me is complicated, my loves," Jessica replied, searching for words that could satisfy their curiosity without creating unrealistic expectations. "We're getting to know each other again, as friends." "But you were already married," argued Ethan, always the most logical one. "You already know each other." "People change over time," she explained patiently. "Your father and I are different people now compared to who we were 7 years ago." The boys seemed to accept the explanation, at least temporarily. But Gabriel's direct question kept echoing in Jessica's mind for days. The following Friday, she received an unexpected call from Michael in the middle of the workday. "Sorry to bother you at work," he said, sounding unusually nervous. but I need to ask you a favor." "Is something wrong?" she asked, instantly worried. "About the boys?" "No, nothing like that," Michael assured her quickly. "Actually, I got an invitation to an important awards ceremony next Saturday. NextFin, that startup I founded after leaving the family business, is nominated for the Technological Innovation of the Year award." "That's great. Congratulations," Jessica replied, genuinely impressed. NextFin was a side project Michael had started 2 years earlier, applying his financial expertise to developing innovative tech solutions. "Thanks, and well, I was wondering if you'd like to come with me." The question caught Jessica completely off guard. "Like a date?" she asked directly, needing clarity. "If you want to see it that way," he answered, the nervousness still in his voice. "Or just has 2 friends celebrating a professional achievement." Jessica hesitated. It was a big step appearing publicly with Michael at a social event, especially one so significant for his career. "I understand if it's complicated," he added quickly, interpreting her silence as reluctance. "It was just an idea." "No, I think it could be nice," she finally replied. "The boys can stay with Mrs. Johnson for a movie and pizza night. They'd love that." "Really?" The surprise and joy in his voice were almost tangible. "That would be amazing. Thank you, Jessica." "What time is the event?" "It starts at 8. Can I pick you up at 7? "Perfect," she agreed, surprised by the slight tremor of anticipation in her own voice. After hanging up, Jessica remained seated in her executive chair for several minutes, contemplating the magnitude of what she had just agreed to. This wasn't just a social commitment. It was a symbolic step towards something she had never considered possible: reconciliation, at least on some level, with Michael. On the night of the event, Jessica took extra care with her appearance. She chose a royal blue evening gown she had bought for a business event but never worn, with an elegant open back. She paired it with understated jewelry and a sophisticated updo that accentuated her long neck. When the doorbell rang exactly at 7, she felt a nervousness she hadn't experienced in years. Mrs. Johnson and the boys were in the TV room, already immersed in the start of a superhero movie marathon, with pizza and soda, ready for a fun night. "Wow," was all Michael managed to say when she opened the door. He looked sharp in a perfectly tailored tuxedo, his hair neatly cut and combed back. "You don't look so bad yourself," Jessica replied, allowing herself to appreciate the sight of the man in front of her. For a moment, they just stood there looking at each other as if seeing one another for the first time. It was one of the boys, running to the entryway after hearing the doorbell, who broke the spell. "Dad," Gabriel exclaimed, hugging Michael's legs, "are you here to watch movies with us?" "Not tonight, champ," Michael replied, crouching down to hug his son properly. "Your mom and I have an engagement, but I promise we'll have a movie marathon next weekend, deal?" Gabriel nodded, satisfied with the promise, and ran back to join his brothers. Jessica picked up her clutch and a light shawl, getting ready to leave. "Have fun, kids," she called, waving toward the TV room, "and listen to Mrs. Johnson." 3. Voices replied in unison, though clearly more interested in the movie than their parents' departure. The awards ceremony was taking place at a luxurious hotel in downtown Denver. During the drive in Michael's car, they chatted comfortably about work, the boys, and their expectations for the event. There was a natural ease in their interaction that surprised Jessica, as if the years of separation had been compressed into days. When they arrived, they were greeted with the typical attention reserved for important figures in the business world. Jessica, as CEO of the Horizon Group, was a familiar presence at these kinds of events. Michael, though less known in Denver's executive circles, drew curious glances as the creator of NextFin, one of the most promising startups in the financial sector. A few curious eyes followed them as they walked through the hall together, likely recognizing them as former spouses. Jessica realized she didn't mind the speculation. In fact, there was something strangely liberating about appearing in public with Michael, as if they were finally closing a painful chapter of their lives. NextFin was competing against 4 other companies in the technological innovation category. When the host began announcing the winner, Jessica instinctively grabbed Michael's hand, squeezing it in anticipation. And the winner of this year's Technological Innovation Award is Nextfin with its revolutionary accessible investment platform. The look of shock and joy on Michael's face was contagious. Jessica was the first to hug him in congratulations, a genuine warm embrace that lasted a few seconds longer than typical for ex-spouses. "Congratulations," she exclaimed, truly happy for his achievement. Michael went up to the stage to accept the award, still visibly emotional. In his acceptance speech, he surprised Jessica by mentioning her. "I'd especially like to thank Jessica Parker, an extraordinary woman who taught me the true meaning of resilience and reinvention. You're my constant inspiration." Jessica's eyes unexpectedly welled up at the public acknowledgement. When Michael returned to the table carrying the gleaming trophy, she couldn't hold back an emotional smile. "You didn't have to mention me," she said, as other winners were announced in different categories. "Yes, I did," he replied, holding her hand on the table. "You're the reason I started Nextfin, you know. After I lost my position in the family business, I was completely lost. That's when I read your interview in Business Review about how you built the Horizon Group from scratch after a difficult personal restart." Jessica vaguely remembered the interview where she had been deliberately vague about her personal past. "Your words about turning adversity into opportunity hit me hard," Michael continued. "I realized I was drowning in self-pity when I should have been using my experience to create something new, like you did." The revelation moved Jessica in a way she hadn't expected. The idea that, even separated, they had somehow influenced each other's journeys was deeply meaningful. After the awards ceremony, an elegant cocktail reception followed. Several business people approached to congratulate Michael on his win and Jessica on the continued success of the Horizon Group. For many, it was the first time they'd seen the two together, and the curiosity was evident in their carefully worded questions and glances. Around midnight, as the party began winding down, Michael leaned over to ask Jessica if she'd like to leave. "Actually, I'm a little hungry," she admitted, realizing she had barely touched her food at the cocktail party due to all the social interactions. "I know a place," Michael suggested, a mischievous glint in his eyes that reminded her of the young man she had fallen for years ago. "If you trust my recommendation." Jessica smiled, feeling inexplicably young and carefree. "Lead the way, Mr. Award winner." 20 minutes later, they found themselves at a small diner in East Village, known for serving the best sandwiches in the city after midnight. Jessica laughed at the simple establishment, a stark contrast to the luxurious event they had just left. "This is so you," she remarked, as they stepped into the busy spot, even at that late hour. "You've always preferred real food over fancy. Canapés. Some things never change," Michael replied, guiding her to a corner table. Sitting there, her in an elegant evening gown, him in a tuxedo, eating magnificent sandwiches and drinking homemade lemonade, Jessica felt a connection she thought had been permanently broken years ago. It wasn't their old love rekindled. It was something new built on the ruins of the past, but fundamentally different. "I'm really proud of you," she said after they finished eating. "Nextfin is truly revolutionary, transforming the investment market to make it accessible to everyday people is meaningful." "Thank you," he answered, visibly moved by the praise. "That means a lot coming from you, the real visionary between us." The drive home was filled with comfortable conversation, punctuated by moments of silence that felt thoughtful rather than awkward. When they arrived at Jessica's house, Michael insisted on walking her to the door, a chivalrous gesture that seemed both old-fashioned and perfectly fitting for the evening they'd shared. On the porch, lit only by the soft garden lights, there was a moment of hesitation. Jessica realized she was in the same position as a couple after a first date, unsure how the night should end. "Thank you for an extraordinary evening," Michael said, breaking the silence. "It was perfect." "It really was," she agreed, surprised by the sincerity in her own voice. He took a step forward, closing some of the distance between them. "Jessica, She gently placed a finger on his lips, stopping whatever he was about to say. "Let's take it slow," she whispered. "There's too much at stake here. Not just us, but 3 wonderful kids who'd be deeply affected by any rash decisions. Michael nodded in understanding. You're absolutely right, as always. Instead of a kiss, which they had both clearly considered, they shared a warm hug, allowing themselves a moment of physical closeness that acknowledged the shift in their relationship without upsetting the fragile balance they'd built. "Good night, Michael," Jessica said, slowly pulling away. "Good night, Jessica." As she watched him walk back to his car, Jessica reflected on how life often moves in circles, bringing us back to people and places we thought we'd left behind. For good, but under completely transformed circumstances. Inside, she found Mrs. Johnson asleep on the couch, the TV still on at a low volume. The boys, as expected, had dozed off in the living room amid the blankets and pillows they'd spread out for their movie night. Jessica looked at their three sleeping faces, so alike and so much like the man she'd just said goodbye to. A wave of love and gratitude washed over her so intensely it nearly took her breath away. In the months that followed, Jessica and Michael continued carefully building a new kind of relationship. For the triplets, their father's constant presence had become natural, an expected and cherished part of their routines. To the outside world, they were an intriguing example of successful co-parenting after a difficult separation. Between them, however, something deeper was blossoming. Occasional weekday lunches without the boys. Late-night text messages sharing thoughts and reflections. Hands that accidentally brushed against each other during family outings. Matthew's health had improved significantly under the new medication regimen, his heart condition stabilizing, to the point where Dr. James began talking about gradually reducing some medications. On a particularly pleasant Saturday morning, nearly a year after their initial reunion at the mall, the family had planned a picnic at the Botanical Garden in Denver. Jessica was in the kitchen making sandwiches when the triplets burst in, followed by Michael. "Mom, Dad has a surprise," announced Gabriel, always the most excited about news. Jessica raised a questioning eyebrow in Michael's direction, who looked both nervous and determined. "Boys, remember what we talked about," he said. "Go finish packing your picnic bags while I talk to your mom." The three nodded with almost comical solemnity before racing upstairs. "What's going on?" Jessica asked, curious about all the secrecy. Michael took a few steps toward her, reaching into his jacket pocket. "I had this big speech prepared," he began, visibly nervous. "About second chances, new beginnings and paths that cross again. But I think simplicity is better." To Jessica's complete surprise, he knelt before her, pulling out a small velvet box. "It's not a marriage proposal," he clarified quickly, opening the box to reveal a delicate silver ring with a small blue stone. "Not even a formal request to date, really. It's a symbol, a promise, an intention." Jessica watched speechless as he continued, "This is a promise ring. I'm promising to be the best father I can be for our children. I'm promising to be patient as we rediscover who we are, together and apart. I'm promising never to let insecurities or impulses destroy something precious again." He paused, looking into her eyes with genuine intensity. "And more than anything, I'm promising never to take you for granted again, in whatever capacity you choose to keep me in your life." Jessica felt tears forming in her eyes, moved by the absolute sincerity of his words. "It's a request for us to start again," Michael went on. "Not from scratch, because we have a history and 3 wonderful reasons never to forget the past. But a fresh start all the same. This time with open eyes, lessons learned, and hopefully wiser hearts." He extended the box toward her, the small ring glinting in the sunlight streaming through the kitchen window. "You don't have to answer. No," he added quickly. "In fact, I want you to think about it for as long as you need, weeks, months, whatever it takes." Jessica looked at the ring, then at the man kneeling before her. No longer the arrogant, insecure young man who had thrown her out of their home 7 years ago, nor the broken, defeated businessman she'd reunited with at the mall nearly a year earlier. The Michael before her now was someone new, forged by the fire of loss, regret, and redemption. With a clarity that surprised her, she realized she wasn't the same woman anymore either. Not the insecure young wife she had once been, nor the cold, calculating executive she had become afterward. She was someone new, someone who had learned that strength and vulnerability weren't mutually exclusive, that independence and connection could coexist in harmony. Without saying a word, she extended her left hand to him. Michael looked at her with a mix of hope and confusion. "Are you sure?" he asked, his voice almost a whisper. "You don't have to decide now." "I'm sure I want to try," she replied with a small smile. "The rest we'll figure out together day by day." With slightly trembling hands, Michael slid the ring onto her finger, not the ring finger where a wedding band would go, but the middle finger, symbolizing a new beginning, a promise unlike anything they had shared before. At that moment, they heard the sound of hurried footsteps coming down the stairs. The triplets burst into the kitchen, their faces eager. "Did she say yes?" Ethan asked, always straight to the point. Jessica and Michael exchanged surprised glances. "You knew about this?" she asked, raising her hand to show the ring now adorning her finger. "Of course," Gabriel replied, as if it were obvious. "We helped Dad pick out the ring and rehearse the speech," Matthew added proudly, "though he seems to have forgotten most of it." Michael laughed, standing up to pull all three into a hug. "I forgot everything the moment I looked at your mother," he admitted. Luckily, the right words came naturally. Jessica joined the group hug, her heart overflowing with a joy she hadn't felt in years. The five of them stayed like that for a long moment, a family brought together by extraordinary circumstances, united not just by blood, but by conscious choices and renewed love. "So," Gabriel finally said, ever practical, "are we still going on the picnic?" The adults laughed, the solemn moment giving way to the everyday practicality of family life. "Of course we are," Jessica assured them. "Help finish packing while your father and I wrap up the sandwiches." As the boys scattered in a whirlwind of activity, Michael turned to Jessica, a contented smile on his face. "Thank you," he said simply. "For what?" "For giving me far more than I deserve. A second chance with my kids, a future with you." Jessica smiled thoughtfully. "You know, I used to think that night, when you kicked me out of the house, was the worst thing that ever happened to me. Now looking back, I realize it was just the start of a journey that brought me here. I wouldn't change a thing if it meant not having my kids exactly as they are, or not becoming the woman I am today." Michael nodded, understanding perfectly what she meant. "Life rarely goes the way we plan," he reflected, "but sometimes, if we're lucky, it takes us exactly where we need to be." Jessica looked through the kitchen window, where she could see the triplets running through the garden, their laughter filling the Saturday morning air. The ring on her finger glinted in the sun, not a symbol of confinement as she had once feared, but of freedom from anger, resentment, and the fear that had kept her emotionally isolated for so long. She didn't know exactly what this new chapter of their lives would look like. There would be challenges, no doubt, adjustments and difficult moments as they navigated the unfamiliar territory of a blended family. But for the first time in years, Jessica Parker was genuinely hopeful about the future, ready to embrace the endless possibilities ahead. That sunny afternoon in the Botanical Garden of Denver, as she watched Michael and the boys playing tag, among the exotic flowers, Jessica felt a deep peace settle in her heart. The circle was complete. The journey that had begun 7 years ago with pain and betrayal had finally led her to a place of healing and renewal. 7 years earlier, she had left the mansion in New York City with nothing but the clothes on her back and a secret even she hadn't known. Now she was returning to life with a business empire built by her own hands, 3 wonderful children, and a renewed heart, ready to love again, more wisely, more deeply, more completely. When Michael approached, offering his hand to help her up from the picnic blanket, Jessica accepted it without hesitation. Together they walked toward their children, toward the future, toward all the possibilities that still awaited them. The end of the story. Dear listener, if this story of overcoming and new beginnings has touched your heart, leave your like and share your thoughts in the comments. Do you believe Jessica made the right decision in giving Michael a second chance? Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our next inspiring real-life stories.